Today, we're going to talk about every single party in Club Penguin's entire 13-year history. For those of you who've never played the game, parties were monthly, or usually monthly, limited time events where the in-game world would don special decorations to fit a specific theme, like Halloween, or pirates, or music even. These parties were a big part of the live service element of the game, and were often among the largest drivers of fan excitement. But throughout the game's history, parties would change in scope, length, themes, rewards, and more, and I want to explore the way they shifted throughout this video. And honestly, as a bonus, this will likely serve as insight on how the game changed over time as well. So, no need to beat around the bush. We have over 150 events to go over, so let's do it. The Beta Test Party. The Beta Test Party was a short event that took place on September 21st, 2005, to celebrate the official release of the game after a month's work of bug testing between the developers and beta players. There were almost no decorations save for one banner in the town, and a couple of boxes full of the party hat, also known as the beta hat, which is easily one of the most prestigious and also one of the most cheated-in cosmetics in the entire game. Fun fact though, I had forgotten this. There were technically two beta test parties, both occurring on the same day, just at different times. One at 3 p.m. GMT, and one several hours later at 3 p.m. PST. That was very nice of them, because each of the parties only lasted a short 2 hours. The Halloween Party. The first Halloween party was the second party in Club Penguin's history. It lasted only 5 days, which is a lot shorter than the party length that players would be accustomed to in years following. It was also a lot more modestly decorated than the subsequent Halloween parties. I mean, the color of the sky didn't even change. Still though, I definitely have a soft spot for these simpler events. Like, 2 pumpkins set up in the dojo? Why the heck not, you know? It's simple, it's cute, it's homey. Despite this, it was called the biggest party in Club Penguin history, which I guess it's technically right, but it's not like there was a lot of competition. The Great Puffle Discovery. November of 2005 didn't have a party per se, but it still had a bit of a unique event. With the first documented appearances of Puffles, players could find them by mousing certain objects on the island, and they would be greeted by a sighting of a blue or pink Puffle. The Penguin Times hosted a naming competition for these creatures, as the name Puffle hadn't been decided on, and real players of the game were allowed to submit suggestions for a potential reward of 5,000 in-game coins, which is not a bad chunk of change, especially because you couldn't cheese it with Kart Surfer as that game was not a thing yet. Right at the end of the event, the minigame Puffle Roundup was introduced, but it had to be accessed through the Snow Forts, because the plaza was not in the game at this point. The Christmas Party. From December 22nd to December 25th, the entire island, or what we knew of it, was decorated for the game's first Christmas party. The decorations were quote-unquote 2005 modest, but players got to get 2 classic items for free, those being the Christmas scarf and the Santa hat. Also, the Penguin Band was seen for the first time in the game, although they had appeared previously in Penguin Chat 3. It's worth noting that the Penguin Band's vocalist, Frankie, wasn't there yet and would make his debut later on. The Winter Luau. From January 27th to 29th, 2006, Club Penguin had its only Winter Luau event. A few select rooms were decorated with a somewhat kitschy tropical island theme, and players who went to the dock were able to pick up the Hawaiian light, also known as the red light. Some of you may have heard of it. The nightclub floor panels also spelled out Aloha. The Valentine's Day celebration. For one day and one day only, love was on the minds of penguins hanging out of the town. The nightclub was the only seriously decorated room with red and pink balloons and streamers all over, but that was pretty much it. Interestingly, this was the only big Valentine's party in the game's history. The Pizza Parlor Opening Party. Later in February, the plaza area of the island was finally opened for the first time, and with it came the initial opening of the pizza parlor for everyone, as long as they were a member. It was the first members-only party, but the plaza would open up for everyone soon after. The pet shop was also seen for the first time, but it wouldn't be officially open for another few weeks. The St. Patrick's Day Party. To some people, this barely even counts as a party, but it seems the general consensus is that this is a party, even though from what I can tell, basically nothing happened. The 2005 to 2006 Club Penguin yearbook remembers it as quite an elaborate event, but the only thing that was different in Club Penguin from March 17th to the 20th was a small box in an otherwise empty ski village with a bunch of free shamrock hats. That's it. That's the only unique decoration. It reminds me of DashCon. Jokes aside, this party also had the first pin ever, which can be found in the coffee shop. I guess that sorta counts as a decoration. Kinda. The April Fool's Party. This is a really cute one. To celebrate April Fool's Day 2006, the island had a bunch of silly decorations put up all over. Most of the rooms decorated had typical gags like comedically placed furniture, but there were some more unique gags, like a game of Pong being broadcast at the nightclub panels. There's also the fact that the developers completely removed all the color from the dojo, so it would look like it was a drawing done on paper by a gigantic floating pencil, which is one of the first times I think the Club Penguin party decorations really got zany. The Easter egg hunt. For Easter weekend, penguins could embark on a scavenger hunt looking for a bunch of colorful eggs hidden around the island. Collecting all 8 of them would reward you with a cute little pink bunny hood, which is fun. I like that. The underground opening party. In May, a few new classic rooms became available for the first time, those being the boiler room, the cave, which would become the pool in a few months, and the mine. This was pretty similar to the pizza parlor opening earlier that same year, because it was a members-only party to celebrate the opening of a new area, but afterwards the area will be made available to all players. On the last day, Kart Surfer was made available for the first time. The summer party. Although the setting of Club Penguin isn't exactly a tropical paradise, the summer party encouraged penguins to pretend it was and enjoy the Antarctic warm season under the shade of an artificial palm tree. Except for the fact that the Antarctic is in the southern hemisphere, so this is actually the coldest time of year, more or less. Most of the decorations were inflatable pool toys and beach towels, but the nightclub's floor was replaced with a swimming pool, and the dojo was entirely unchanged, save for a gigantic inflatable octopus in the middle of it. I love that. This was also the first party to give out a staggering 4 free items, which was more than what players had come to expect. The beach was also initially added to the game, although the lighthouse was going to be closed for a little while longer. The Western Party. In July, the game had a Western-themed party. You know, cowboys and square dancing and stuff. Compared to the summer party, the decorations and free items were a bit less ambitious, but I really like what they did to the nightclub. The hay was a nice touch. This was also the first in-game appearance of Frankie in the Penguin Band, and he can be seen complimenting the initial jazz trio on acoustic guitar. The Instrument Hunt. Right after the Western Party, the game held a scavenger hunt type event where players had to retrieve the Penguin Band's lost items, because apparently after the Western Party they just left the instruments in the nightclub expecting someone to deliver them back to their igloos, but that did not happen. Instead, the piano ended up in the pet shop, the snare drum somehow grew in size and ended up being used as a table in the pizza parlor, and the banjo was submerged underwater. Players who collected all of the instruments would be rewarded with a signed photo of the band, which could be used as a background. The Sports Party. Club Penguin really celebrated its Canadian origin in August, with a whole party dedicated to hockey culture. Players were encouraged to show their red or blue team spirit with a myriad of themed cosmetics, and certain rooms were decorated as team-specific hotspots. Hockey had always been playable in Club Penguin, but the room got pretty tricked out for this specific event. The Cave Room was also finally rebranded as the pool that it's more well known as. Lighthouse Restoration. I'm basically lumping 3 events into one here, but throughout the month of September, Club Penguin held events for the funding, restoration, and official opening of the Lighthouse Room. Players were able to donate in-game coins to the construction of the lighthouse, and at a certain threshold will be rewarded with a lighthouse shirt. There was also a scavenger hunt to find a light bulb good enough to be used as a beacon, and once the project was done, players were invited to a short party to celebrate the new room. It wasn't even members exclusive. The new beacon also led Rockhopper to Club Penguin Island for the first time, which would become a fun recurring event. The first anniversary party. The coffee shop was decorated to celebrate Club Penguin's first birthday, and all players who logged on were able to pick up the green and blue party hat. There was a gigantic cake too, which was pretty warranted because just in its first year, the game had already amassed over 1 million registered players. Halloween Party 2006. The second annual Halloween party is a good exhibit of the increasing scale and pizzazz the parties had developed even after just 1 year. There were noticeably more decorations this time around, and need I mention the giant elephant in the room? Or, to speak more literally, the giant moon blocking the sun? Because for the entirety of the party, the island was right under a solar eclipse, which was the canonical explanation for why it looked like it was night the whole time. It's not scientific at all, but as Billy Bob said, that doesn't really matter that much. You even got to see the southern lights from the iceberg, which is pretty cool. The Color Party. The Penguin Times held a vote in the month of November for a new wearable color. Penguins had to vote between lime green and lavender, and the winning lime green became the main focus of the members-only color party in the dojo, where players could get the new lime green color and a lime green cape as well. Fortunately, lime green would be added as a standard item in the Penguin-style catalog that both non-members and members could use. Christmas Party 2006. The second annual Christmas party had a lot going on. Rockhopper docked his ship for the festivities and introduced red puffles to the island. The island experienced a lot more snowfall than usual, and the excess snow would be used a couple months later in the Festival of Snow. It was the first party in Club Penguin history to reuse a free item from a previous party, as players once again were given the opportunity to get the Santa hat from 2005, along with the newly added Santa beard. This didn't end up being a super unique thing, but it was the first time. Although it was still called the Christmas party, the coffee shop had a lot of blue decorations and a menorah to celebrate Hanukkah as well. New Year's Day 2007. The New Year's party was kind of like a mini event that took place during the Greater Christmas Party 2006 event. On New Year's Day, a whole bunch of fireworks were seen from the iceberg and Ski Hill. This became a yearly tradition in the game. Winter Fiesta 2007. This is kind of a funny one. For January, Club Penguin decided to do a swinter thing and throw kind of a Tex-Mex desert-themed party to get over the winter blues and record snowfall from the previous month.
Some people call it warmer.
Yeah, they kind of had like an arc going on with the Christmas party snowfall. I'll admit though, it's a fun idea, and I really like the decorations. Pizza and Buffalo piñatas are kind of my style. Festival of Snow. In previous videos, I've made it clear how much of a soft spot I have for the developers of Club Penguin reaching out to the community for contributions to the game, so I have a really soft spot for this party. Because there was so much snow collected in the previous couple of months, the game held an event where real players could submit their own original drawings to be used as in-game ice sculptures on display during the festival. I love that. It was also around this time that tour guides were officially added to Club Penguin, although the booth was originally placed in the plaza before it would eventually be moved to its more well-known location in the ski village. St. Patrick's Day Party 2007. After 3 months of explicitly winter-themed events, Club Penguin celebrated the coming spring, figuratively painting the town red by literally painting it green. The decorations were a big step up from last year's party, except for the one corner of the coffee shop they never seemed to finish painting. April Fool's Party 2007. This party was the start of a certain phenomenon that in the present moment I can only really describe as the box thing. Club Penguin had many things over the years, but the box thing was one of its earliest. For April Fools, the entire island was covered in boxes. These boxes could be opened and they would have little animated surprises. The pizza parlor had a particular box that had a purple spiral pattern on the inside that many of you may notice as a box dimension portal. But it's worth noting the box dimension wouldn't be added to the game for a couple more years. Easter Egg Hunt 2007. The Easter egg hunt this year was basically the same as last year, just with the eggs placed at different locations and the final reward being blue bunny ears instead of the pink ones. Pirate Party 2007. Rockhopper stopped by for the game's first pirate party, whose theme is pretty self-explanatory. The island was covered in pirate paraphernalia, and everyone was encouraged to dress up and act the part. It was also the first time penguins were able to go inside of Rockhopper's ship hold. Rockhopper had docked on the island several times before, but players could only explore the upper deck, so the extra room was a nice addition. Cove Opening Party. It's kind of crazy to imagine that it took almost 2 years for the forest and cove to be added to Club Penguin, but yeah. The Cove Opening Party was the final party exclusively dedicated to the introduction of a new room, and like the others, it was members only. Although the forest part of the party was accessible to anyone, and players who went could get a free whistle. This event was kind of cool because they hyped it up with a mini scavenger hunt thing the weeks prior. Players saw a map to the cove stuck on the mountain ski trail sign and chased it as it blew around the island until they could pick it up in the snow forts, which would give them access to the forest where the cove was being built. Summer Kickoff Party. June of 2007 saw the game's second official summer-themed shindig. I really can never stop saying how much I love the mid-2007 art direction for this game. I think it was right at the point in time where the game was clearly doing well enough that they could be ambitious with the extravagance of their presentation, but it was still pretty small in the grand scheme of things, and the total art direction had not changed that much so far. It was just a very charming point in time, I think. I love the decorations this party had so much. It's just the right amount of showmanship for me, I think. I'm not as big of a fan of how they would later on redecorate rooms in a way where they would end up completely unrecognizable from their original form. This is the sweet spot for me. Also, fun fact, this party had a whopping 5 free items for both members and non-members, which is a lot more than the typical 1 to 2 for this era. This would actually be the record until it was broken by the 2011 holiday party over 4 years later. Water Party 2007. You would be forgiven if you mixed this party's decorations up with the summer kickoff party, because when 2 parties in a row put up a lot of beach chairs and pool toys, it can be a bit confusing. That being said, I think the water party still has its own identity, especially with a story behind it. It all started with a crab who apparently isn't Klutzy the Crab, accidentally cracking one of the windows in the underground pool and flooding several rooms. The penguins used a lot of the excess water to create swimming pools and overhead sprinklers, essentially turning the island into a water park. Huh. When life gives you lemons, I guess. The Avalanche of 2007. As a small promotional tie-in for the release of the 4th PSA mission where the player has to save a few penguins who were stranded by an avalanche, the mount was redesigned to reflect the aftermath of the event, and it matches up really well with how it looks within the PSA mission. I like that. Camp Penguin. Fun fact, this was the first official party that was held in the game after it was formally acquired by Disney Interactive Studios. Actually, that might not be a fun fact for some of you. For this party, the entire island was decorated like a summer camp with hiking trails, picnics, and even a mess hall replacing the pizza parlor. There were also a few fireplaces put up where penguins could roast marshmallows and tell stories or, I don't know, vote each other out and stuff. 100th newspaper event. To celebrate the 100th issue of the Club Penguin Times, the boiler room was redecorated with a bunch of balloons and streamers for the occasion. The color choice of gray and black is an interesting one. I suppose it matches the color of the newspaper, but it's not usually what I think of when I imagine color schemes for a party. Fall Fair 2007. One thing you guys are going to learn very intimately is that the fair parties are very, very, very special to me. Towards the end of August, Rockhopper left a whole bunch of suspicious hidden boxes inside of the lighthouse with instructions not to open until the first day of fall. And when the time came, the boxes were opened and they stored everything the island would need to host an entire carnival. If you can't tell by my voice, I am very enthusiastic about the Club Penguin fairs. I love the added minigames, I love the decorations, and I love, love, love the Rockhopper cardboard cutouts. I don't know why, I just do. There were no completely free items, but players were encouraged to participate in the minigames to win tickets that could be traded in for prizes, and these are good prizes too. Fun novelty items that aren't overly designed that fit really well on any penguin, especially if they're a Pookie. Second Anniversary Party. The game's second anniversary party was pretty similar to the first one, except they ditched the blue and green for citrusy orange and yellow. The decorations also made their way up to the book room, partially to highlight the addition of the 2006 to 2007 yearbook, which was a really cute little way the game chronicled the major events over the past year. Ironically, this is the first in-game yearbook, despite it not being about the first full year on Club Penguin. The 2005 to 2006 yearbook had to be added retroactively a few months later to fill out the entire game's history. Either way, I love the yearbooks, and if you haven't noticed, I've used them here and there for visuals in this video. On multiple occasions, I would go to the book room and just read every single yearbook in order for no reason. I guess the reason is that it was fun. I'm kind of a nerd about this game. Halloween Party 2007. Compared to 2006, this year's Halloween Party was a clear visual step up, with a lot more decorations that I would say had a bit more variety, but that's definitely not all. This party also marked the debut of the award-winning Night of the Living Sled series of horror films, presented in surround subtitles. The lighthouse was turned into a little movie theater with concessions and everything where penguins could watch the film. There was also a scavenger hunt, where penguins could collect pieces of candy in exchange for a snazzy black and orange Halloween scarf. One more thing, yellow puffles made their initial debut into the game, hidden in the forest in Ski Hill. They wouldn't be adoptable until the following month, but it was cool to see the whole thing hinted at ahead of time. Surprise Party. In early November, the Club Penguin Times hosted a poll where players could vote for the next party. There were three options: a pirate party, a western party, and a sports party, which were all themes that had been done before. The party that ended up winning was the western party, and just over a week later the game covered itself in hay, cacti, and cardboard hoodoo props. Also, if you didn't notice, this is the first party that took place after the stage was introduced to the game. Christmas Party 2007. If you were thinking I am a serious old head for this game because of my penguin wearing the Christmas scarf from the original 2005 Club Penguin Christmas Party, I regret to inform you that I did not get that item in the original 2005 party. I got it when it was made available again 2 years later, though, I mean, that's still pretty old. Something really special about this party is how it was the first time the game held a coins for change event. Basically, players were encouraged to donate their in-game coins to real-life charities that matter to them, and the donations would determine the percentage share each charity would get out of a total sum of $1 million. Altogether, 2.5 million penguins donated a total of 2 billion coins, which is a lot. New Year's Day 2008. This year's New Year's event was pretty much the same deal as last year. Fireworks on the ski hill and iceberg, although a few Christmas party decorations remain since that party hadn't ended yet. Winter Fiesta 2008. The game had its second Winter Fiesta party, and I know I've been saying this a lot, but it was a very overt step up in terms of ambition for decorations. They replaced the nightclub with El Dorado. They really tricked out the pizza parlor and coffee shops, especially compared to last year. All in all, I really like the choice of colors. Very bright and saturated all over. Even the one free item in this party, the festive maracas, is noticeably more colorful than last year's maracas. Save the Migrator project. This one is a bit more complicated than most of the other parties, as it is a whole arc of events that took place over several months. Luckily, I have talked about this before. Watch the video. In January of 2008, players who looked through the telescope on the beacon would see the grisly sight of Rockhopper on the Migrator crashing into a whole iceberg. Fortunately, the game made sure to demonstrate that he didn't, die. He arrived on the island through a smaller rowboat and gave everyone free life jackets. Gary the Gadget Guy drafted a plan to restore the Migrator with a submarine vehicle that would go underwater and retrieve the sunken parts. Like some kind of aqua grabber, or a deep sea salvage, or a depth diver. Aqua grabber won the poll. It was a really cool way to introduce what was pretty clearly Club Penguin's most zealous minigame so far. Over the next couple of months, you could see the status of the project over at the beach. After the complete restoration, the game held a party for the return of Rockhopper and Yar, but I will have to tell you about that later, because a few parties happened in between. Submarine Party. While the Aqua Grabber 3000 was being developed, the island held a whole underwater-themed party to go along with the project. Because I guess that's what you do when your pirate ship sinks and is at the mercy of the ocean. You throw a party about it. This was a real turning point for in-game party decorations. This wasn't the first party to have rooms that were entirely redrawn for the event, but I don't think there's been a party up to this point that completely overhauled as many rooms as this one, and these are fun decorations. The underwater nightclub is probably my favorite, but pretty much every major room has at least one or two ideas I really like. All in all, super cool. St. Patrick's Day Party 2008. This year's St. Patrick's Day party had everything painted green as usual, but this time around the island had a whole parade going on from the ski village to the forest, with each room in between having its own float decorations, except the town. Also, instead of the shamrock hat that had been given out the past 2 years during the party, this year went for an oversized novelty foam leprechaun hat.
Hey, I can take this hat off anytime I want. I just don't want to. Get away!
Easter Egg Hunt 2008. This year's Easter egg hunt was more or less the same song and dance as the previous years, just for green bunny ears this time. There was one unique challenge though. One of the eggs was a ninja egg that would disappear and reappear out of thin air in the dojo, which made it a bit harder to get a hold of than all the other eggs. April Fool's Party 2008. Speaking purely off of my own personal tastes, this year's April Fool's was a big step up from last year's. The box thing was okay, I suppose, but I think this year's primary gimmick of replacing the usual art for the rooms with drawings and art projects with varying degrees of, prowess is really funny and infectious in its charm. Big ups to the MS Paint Lodge Attic. The Connect the Dots Mind Shack is excellent. I think my personal favorite, maybe due to nostalgia, is the iceberg being replaced with a photograph of a bucket of water with ice cubes in it, and a paper cutout of the Aqua Grabber sticking out. Rockhopper and Yar's Arrival Party. The Club Penguin Times said it better than I could. Preparing Penguins have proclaimed a pirate party in praise of partnership that pulled Paris ship pieces to shore. First time, by the way. First time there. Despite having a special name that wasn't just Pirate Party, this party was very much a pirate party if you couldn't tell by a lot of the shared decorations. Also, the captain's quarters on the Migrator were made open for the first time in this party, for any penguin who got the key from his journal. Medieval Party 2008. This was a party the developers of the game had wanted to do since 2005, but due to a lack of money and manpower, they decided to wait a few years because they really wanted a party with this theme to be extravagant. And yeah, you can see it with how above and beyond they went. Like, they literally decorated the pet shop. That is not something we see a lot. I think one of my favorite gimmicks is the ski lodge being reimagined as a dainty tea party and the attic being a castle hallway with fountains. It was also drawn from kind of a weird perspective, not the kind you'd usually see in this game. Not a complaint though, definitely not a complaint. Water Party 2008. I felt a little bad earlier for teasing the game for having a summer kickoff party and water party directly back to back last year, but honestly I feel a little less bad now because the year after they merged the two parties together thematically for June. It was a good idea because I think it lets the passing months feel a bit more unique, and it also made space for a very special party to me. One cool thing you can do during this party is click a hose that was on the bottom right of your screen in every room and just blast water everywhere. It was like Desktop Destroyer, but in the game. Mysterious Tremors. This is a small event, but it's worth mentioning. Toward the end of June, the island had a series of earthquakes caused by none other than Herbert P. Bear. PSA agents would be able to investigate the happenings in a new mission, but all penguins were able to see the damage in the main game. Although, they didn't go as far as to submerge the gift shop underground. Probably for, playability and accessibility and stuff. Music Jam 2008. This is a really nostalgic party for me, I'm not gonna lie. My Penguin's main outfit is literally the shirt that was given out for free. The entire island was covered in stages to celebrate music in all its forms. They had rock shows at the ice rink, open mics at the coffee shop, orchestras playing at the ski village, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. It was also the first party where the Penguin Band became meetable mascots as opposed to just NPCs that would play on loop forever. It also marked the debut of the minigame DJ 3K, where players could make their own DJ mixes by splicing a bunch of samples together. It was a good party. Paper Boat Scavenger Hunt 2008. This was a small event that took place in August, where players could look for pieces of blueprints Rockhopper drew up for a ship-themed igloo. Finding all of them wouldn't net them the igloo itself, but they did get a cool blueprint-themed background. Penguin Games. Later in August, Club Penguin threw a sports-themed party that may or may not have been done to coincide with the 2008 Olympics. The theme was much less centered on hockey than the sports party from 2006, so much so that the ice rink was replaced with a soccer field, which became a change that would happen for 6 months every year. Players were able to compete in 3 events to win a gold medal, those being the marathon across the island, a swimming event in the underwater pool, and a 3-lap race on the iceberg. Fall Fair 2008. The second Fall Fair was pretty similar to the first one. There wasn't as much of a build-up this year, but the party had a few more games, a few more prizes, and even a bonus room added to make more space for the extra content. And like a lot of other parties this year, there was a clear step up in manpower put into decorating the island. The iceberg was turned into a gigantic floating ball pit. The cave had a really cute merry-go-round with 2 fish and a horse. Third anniversary party. This was the most ambitious anniversary party by far, and it stayed that way for a while. It lasted multiple days, which was a first, and the decorations seeped outside of just the coffee shop, with the town and nightclub being decorated. The decorations also seeped into the real world. Club Penguin had a real-life event in Times Square to celebrate. They also had Jake T. Austin from Wizards of Waverly Place show up. Like, it's Max! Look at that! Rockhopper also showed up. In the game, I mean. Not in real life. But this was the first time a mascot showed up for an anniversary party as well. Halloween Party 2008. Literally right after the 3rd anniversary party, Club Penguin had its 4th Halloween party ever. Like the previous year, there was a candy scavenger hunt and a new installment in the Night of the Living Sled series. There was a secret room introduced that could be accessed by players who had purchased the Rad Scientist costume item. Inside was a completely black and white secret laboratory that looked suspiciously like the one where the Living Sled was created in the previously mentioned short films. Interestingly, there was no eclipse this time, and the game explained its loss of visibility instead on a huge thunderstorm over the island. There were also ninja shadows that would flash in the otherwise undecorated dojo whenever lightning flashed, a hint of something to come. Most of you know where this is going. Dig out the dojo. The Great Storm of 2008 left most of the island unharmed, save for the dojo. The building was struck by lightning which opened part of the rooftop and presumably caused an avalanche that completely covered the building in snow. So naturally, penguins were encouraged to assist in digging it out. While digging, players had their attention drawn to a nameless gray penguin shoveling away at the snow. And I gotta say it, this player card had aura. Serious aura. After most of the excavating had taken place, the mysterious penguin, now known as Sensei, threw a small party at the dojo to celebrate and also make way for the introduction to Card Jitsu, undoubtedly one of Club Penguin's most beloved minigames. Christmas Party 2008. As usual, Club Penguin went above and beyond for the holidays. The decorations for this year's Christmas party were extensive. The rooms that were usually decorated were decorated even more than usual, and the rooms that usually weren't decorated were decorated. They literally decorated the PSA headquarters. They had never done that before. They also turned the dance lounge into a toy factory for penguin elves, which I happen to think is really cute. I think the only bone I have to pick with this party is that there were no new free items. The items given out had already been in previous Christmas parties, so there wasn't much in the way of new cosmetics for non-members. Still though, the party was great. New Year's Day 2009. I'm only bringing this up for completion's sake because it's the same deal as last year and the year before. Fireworks at the ski hill and iceberg. Impressive. Very nice. Dance-a-thon. The middle of January had a small members-only event in the nightclub focused on dancing. It was Cadence's first appearance in the game and also the debut of the dance contest minigame. Something really cool about this party is that penguins could go to the nightclub's rooftop for the first time, and it was tricked out. From this point forward, it would occasionally open up, mostly for music-themed parties. Winter Fiesta 2009. Toward the end of that same month, Club Penguin had its 3rd and final Winter Fiesta. And wow, it was pretty much the same as it was the previous year. I feel like such a hater, and I don't mean to be super negative, but it's quite striking how similar everything was in 2009 compared to 2008. Most of the rooms are unchanged, with only a couple of exceptions. I think it's just a bit surprising given how extravagant the last few parties were. If I had to guess, and remember, this is just me speculating, I don't think the winter fiestas were seen as particularly important to the developers, and they were only doing this one because they felt like they had to. But then they figured they didn't have to and stopped doing winter fiestas. I don't know though. Puffle Party 2009. It boggles my mind a little bit that it took almost 4 years for the game to have a Puffle Party, but yeah, it almost took 4 years for the game to have its first Puffle Party. To be fair though, it was worth the wait. Like the name says, it was a few days where the island was dedicated to appreciating their beloved pet Puffles. A lot of the rooms were specifically decorated to be hubs for the individual species, and they did a fantastic job at highlighting their unique personalities. Is it species or subspecies? They also began teasing the white Puffle during this party, and it could be seen popping out somewhere every 15 minutes. I also love this party's signature music, although Screenhog has gone on record saying he dislikes it because he thought it was too clearly derivative of Coconut Mall from Mario Kart Wii. And I see, well, hear where he's coming from, but it's not a problem for me. I like the way Coconut Mall sounds, so I also like the way things that sound like Coconut Mall sound. St. Patrick's Day Party 2009. During March, the game had its fourth and final St. Patrick's Day party. There was no island-wide parade this time, so the decorations went above and beyond and just painting basically everything green. Even the snow was green. I think that's less of a bad omen than yellow snow. But there was also a members-only Leprechaun House room with accordions given out for free. But as I said, this was the final St. Patrick's Day party, and honestly, I don't really blame the game for dropping them. They apparently didn't generate a lot of buzz. Also, as the game grew, I imagine the developers wanted to make parties that weren't focused on holidays that are pretty region-specific. I mean, sure, a lot of people celebrate the holiday in the United States and Canada, but there were a lot of people who played the game who didn't celebrate it, and would be receptive to more broadly appealing party themes. You know. Penguin Play Awards 2009. After the St. Patrick's Day party, the game had a small members-only award show type event at the stage, where players were asked to vote for which of the game's 5 most popular plays excelled the most in 5 different categories. And, the trophies were not what I would call evenly distributed. The people of Club Penguin really liked the quest for the gold Puffle, apparently. I've always been more of a Ruby and the Ruby guy. Snow Sculpture Showcase. During the exact same time frame that Club Penguin had its Penguin Play Awards, the game did a similar fan-made snow sculpture contest to what it did for the Festival of Snow 2 years earlier. It was pretty similar, although it is interesting that they waited so long for it to take place. The lodge attic was filled with leftover snow for 3 months, and they originally claimed the sculpture showcase would take place in February before changing it later on. Not to, get on people's case for delaying a video game event 15 years ago, but it is a little interesting. April Fool's Party 2009. We had a short break from the box thing in 2008, but it came back for a second helping this year, with vengeance. There was even a box store that could be accessed from the Snow Force where members could buy boxes to use as furniture, and as you can see, this was the first instance the portal box was able to be purchased in-game. If your penguin walked on the portal box, you would be taken to the box dimension. I wish I had more to say about the box dimension as a concept, but I think a dimension of boxes sums it up pretty well. Easter Egg Hunt 2009. This year's Easter Egg Hunt was pretty much the same deal as the past few years. In fact, the Bunny Hood reward this time was actually the same as the one that was given out in 2006. I feel like I say that in a way that makes it sound like it's a complaint, but I don't mean it to. Especially since this event took place at the end of 4 back-to-back events and parties, I think the developers didn't really need to go above and beyond this time. Medieval Party 2009. Despite the fact that this year's Medieval Party reused most of its main decorations from last year, the party still spiced things up with the introduction of the Knight's Quest, and Princesses too, because we're all about equality at Club Penguin. Members could embark on a short quest through Club Penguin's underground, and doing so would net them a 3-piece suit of snazzy golden armor. The challenges included standing on a bunch of platforms to light up orbs, hitting targets with snowballs, and finding their way out of a maze. This was actually one of the first times the game had a party where players were kind of given a quest to do where they would explore temporarily accessible rooms, and this would very quickly become a staple for the game's events. 101 Days of Fun. This was a bit of a unique event held throughout the summer vacation, where the Club Penguin Times would list special activities for players to do every single day. Usually, these activities would be fun little rut busters that gave some ideas for ways to spend time in the game. There wasn't really any promised reward for these activities, at least that I know of, but the developers on the blog did claim that if you were seen participating by a moderator, you might be given a free 1001 coins. The Adventure Party. So, apparently, Rockhopper showed up in May with a ton of plants. His ship was entirely overgrown with flora that he willingly collected and brought to the island. The island was covered in thickets, groves, and copses pretty much everywhere you looked, and to make the most of the new scenery, the game held the Adventure Party, which is kinda hard to describe. I guess in a nutshell, the island was made to resemble the kinds of tropical, exotic settings you often see in adventure movies. A scavenger hunt encouraged players to explore and find various plants and animals, rewarding them with a free background. This party's decorations are a really good example of how Club Penguin's art style had evolved over the years. Obviously, the game had been getting more and more ambitious with the amount they decorate each room, but when you look at, say, the plants that had taken over the island, it's easy to tell that they are drawn and colored a lot more intricately than they would have been in 2006, for example. Music Jam 2009. This year's Music Jam had a pretty similar song and dance to the previous years. Most of the rooms were relatively unchanged, but you did have a few things shifted around. The Music Maker was moved out of the dojo since that room was now dedicated to card jitsu. The lighthouse was completely changed into an interactive room that had no music playing unless players would play their instruments, and the music would change based on what was being played at any given time. It was also the second time the nightclub rooftop was accessible, and it was a bit spiffed up compared to how it was in January. 2009 Color Vote. During the Music Jam, the game held a small poll where players could vote on adding one of 3 new colors to the game, those being lavender, maroon, and aqua. I personally voted for maroon, but aqua ended up taking the victory. Sadly, this was the last time the game had a color vote, so the losing colors never got to be officially included. Festival of Flight. This one is special to me because it was the first party I experienced as a member. It took a few years to convince my parents to buy me a membership, but man was it worth it. For this party, the entire island was lifted into the air by a gigantic hot air balloon and some propellers. I don't know if the mechanics of that actually work out, but you know, Up came out that year. It was fresh in the collective imagination. The reason the island was suspended in the air was to fix the windows in the underground pool, and I'm no engineer, but there are probably less expensive methods than that. Not that I'm complaining though. The decorations were all sky and flight themed, and I really like how you can see a bunch of empty space where you normally would see the ocean. You could also take a hot air balloon to the tallest mountain in Club Penguin, a location made accessible only once throughout the game's history, at least outside of the PSA missions. The Fair 2009. This year saw a significant change, with the event formerly known as the Fall Fair being renamed as simply the Fair. Despite the name change, the event remained largely the same, with a few things switched up. For one, Rockhopper was meetable for the first time because before this, he would just bring the decorations and then just head off before the party started. Also, the Great Puffle Circus was introduced this year, which was a members-only room where players could see a bunch of stunts and feats performed by different colored puffles. Black Puffle Sightings. This almost doesn't even count, but I'll cover it anyway. To drive up interest for the upcoming Cardjutsu Fire minigame, a bunch of black puffles started hanging out around the island, and if they were approached by someone wearing a ninja outfit, they would light on fire. And they persisted for the next few months worth of events and parties. Sensei's Fire Scavenger Hunt. During the lead up to Cardjutsu Fire, the skies of Club Penguin were tinted a striking orange, and Sensei asked players to collect a bunch of fire-related objects for the occasion. After a week or two, a nearby volcano was activated, which apparently was caused by the fiery objects the players had collected. I don't know, it's a bit weird to piece together. There's no real explanation given for how the skies got orange, to be honest. I thought it might have been because of the volcano, but as the newspaper said, the skies were orange before the volcano became active. Even more awkward than the orange skies is that after 2 weeks, the event just ended with no real explanation and the skies just went back to blue. This was because they intended to release Cardjutsu Fire right after the scavenger hunt, but the game still had so many bugs that they couldn't drop it just yet, and the idea of keeping up the orange sky until the game came out, which would have been over 2 months, was a bit ridiculous, I guess. Polo Field has talked about this event as an instance where the developers bit off more than they could chew, and in the future they became more conscious of how they would lead up to new parties and events in the game. The Great Storm of 2009. Just like last year, there was a large thunderstorm that hit the island in time for the Halloween season, but unlike last year where the thunderstorm pretty much only showed up during the party, players could see this one forming and making its way to the island over the previous weeks. There was also a point made in the Club Penguin Times that the heat and smoke from the volcano helped form the storm this time around. This is just speculation, but I honestly think the plot thread of the volcano contributing to the storm was not part of the initial plan, and it was something they brought up in order to keep it relevant to the game's current events while Cardjutsu Fire was being finished. 4th Anniversary Party. This year's anniversary decorations weren't as sprawling as they were in 2008, but it was a lot of fun nonetheless. Funnily enough, when this party dropped, I made my first Club Penguin YouTube video ever. What can I say? I couldn't dare miss the Footh Club Penguin anniversary. I didn't really know what Hypercam 2 was at this point, so I just filmed the screen with a real-life camera, and I would continue doing this for like a year before I found out about actual screen recording software. Halloween Party 2009. Literally the day after the 4th anniversary party, the Halloween party was set into motion. It had a lot of the same things to do as the year previous, like a candy hunt and a new Night of the Living Sled, but they also had a members-only haunted house room, which was super cool. It was like a room in a point-and-click game, with interactable objects all over that played neat little animations when you clicked on them. Opening of the Fire Dojo. It took a while, but eventually Card-Jitsu Fire development wrapped up and the Fire Dojo was accessible for the first time. Initially, the room was still under construction, and players were able to assist by helping create the ninja amulets using the Goldsmith apron. On November 23rd, the game was released, and the dojo had special decorations for a week or so to celebrate. Afterwards, the lanterns and banners were taken down, and the Fire Dojo took the form most people are familiar with today. The Great Snow Maze. Right at the end of November, there was a small winter-themed party held at the ski village in Ski Hill, and the ice rink. The main attraction here was the aforementioned Great Snow Maze, which was a members-only challenge area where players were tasked with making their way to a Yeti cave where they would be rewarded with a Yeti costume. Holiday Party 2009. In case you didn't notice, the annual Christmas celebration was renamed from the Christmas Party to the Holiday Party, presumably to be more inclusive to individuals who didn't celebrate the holiday. Like last year, they went above and beyond with the decorations, but this time they changed the in-game sky to a beautiful starry night with the southern lights that greatly added to the atmosphere. Even the rooms that were decorated less than they had been years prior felt great to me because the sky just glued it all together. There was also a members-only challenge where players could ride Santa's sled and deliver presents, and they would be rewarded with a Santa suit for doing so. New Year's Day 2010. Once again, fireworks were on display for the new year. It was pretty much identical to how it was in 2009. Let's not waste time. Cave Expedition. Later in January, the mine had a small rock slide leaving a whole bunch of rubble. After cleaning up the rubble, new caves within Club Penguin's underground were discovered, and players were able to go on a short quest to explore it. They would first encounter the cave mine, where they could dig for pieces of a gem that when completed would become the amethyst pin. With that pin, one could then access the hidden lake and underwater rooms, which each had goodies of their own. The party ended after a week or so and the new caves were sealed up, but they were reopened just a couple of months later. Puffle Party 2010. The decorations for this year's Puffle Party were mostly unchanged, but there were a few additions. The Puffle Showroom was added, which was a members-only room that hosted what were basically dog shows, but, you know, not for dogs, for Puffles. There was an obstacle course you could send your Puffle through, as long as it wasn't a black Puffle. Black Puffles would just refuse to do it, and I'll admit that makes me laugh. They also added a room dedicated to white Puffles this year since they were new, and it ended up being in the mine. Speaking of new Puffles, sightings of the orange Puffle began around this time in game, and right after the Puffle Party came to an end, they were officially added as adoptable pets. Penguin Play Awards 2010. During March, the game had its second and final Penguin Play Awards. It was pretty similar to last year in its concept, but it was treated a lot more like a full-on party than a small event, as its decorations spread out a lot further than just the plaza. The nominated entries were all the same as last year, except for one, and once again, the quest for the Golden Puffle had a landslide victory, getting all the same rewards it did the year before. So, best out of 5 then? Even though I kinda questioned the point of running what was basically the exact same poll twice in a row, the party still had a fun theme and a lot of cool items, like the video camera, which I loved holding in game. Wannabe YouTuber and everything. April Fool's Party 2010. This year's April Fool's Party had a lot of new interactable gimmicks, which made exploring an incredibly rewarding experience. I think my favorite new decorations are completely taking out the coffee and gift shops and leaving only the windows and doors, and the mine shack just becoming an endlessly loading screen that you can walk around in. Earth Day 2010. Later in April, the game had a small party to celebrate Earth Day and the importance of recycling and forestation. The mine shack got a total makeover, because penguins in game wanted to rejuvenate the area with a sustainable garden and recycling center nearby. A tree was also planted between the two buildings that would grow over the next few months. There was also a small scavenger hunt done to look for waste that could be recycled, and collecting all the items would net players a pin. I think the intentions behind this party were good, but I do remember the mine shack's renovation getting some mixed reception. Partially because players grew attached to it in its initial state, But I will say that I think the recycling plant was a bit of a half-thought idea. I mean, there was nothing really to do there except throw trash into the Recycletron 3000, which would turn the garbage into various knickknacks. Not the most accurate depiction of a processing plant, but at least the music was good. It's not a surprise, though, that the room was replaced with a school a few years later. Medieval Party 2010. The big draw of this year's Medieval Party was a second Knight's Quest being introduced to the game, which took place in a menacing dragon's cave filled with lava. Lava with toothbrushes. You even got to fight the dragon, and at this point, boss battles were kind of a new thing to the game. I don't know why princesses weren't specified as welcome in the entrance, though. The original Knight's Quest was still accessible this year, but the rewards were different this time around, which gave old players a reason to do it again. Popcorn Explosion. Later in May, Herbert P. Bear finally defeated the Penguin's secret agency by detonating a popcorn bomb that destroyed the sports shop and the PSA headquarters inside. This was shown both in and outside of the point-and-click PSA missions, and over a couple weeks the popcorn was cleaned up. But in the aftermath, both the PSA and the sports shop were replaced with the Elite Penguin Force and the Everyday Phoning Facility, respectively. And I've never been a big fan of that. Not so much the overhaul of the secret agent stuff, but the removal of the sports shop did not go down easy for me. I had grown really attached to it personally. This was one of the first times a permanent in-game room was completely removed, and I don't think it needed to happen, especially when it's replaced by a room that's almost entirely empty and only serves as a way to get to a different room. If you guys can't tell, 2010 is one of the first true old head cutoff points for me. I hope I don't come off as too sour about it though. I just think there was something lost when the in-game secret agent HQ could no longer be accessed through a changing room. Island Adventure Party 2010. This year's Adventure Party had a new name and more evolved decorations compared to the previous year. There was a bit more architecture this time around compared to the excess of foliage in 2009, and there was a particular emphasis on pirates, which was nice because I think it made up for the fact that the pirate parties from earlier in the game's life had been phased out. They also added mermaids too. The hidden lake room was turned into a mermaid cove, and it became accessible from the forest for the first time. There was also a scavenger hunt held, where players had to find pieces of a treasure map to dig up a pirate bandana. Music Jam 2010. The Music Jam this year remained pretty similar to how it was the year before. Most of the decorated rooms stayed pretty similar, with maybe a few extra props added. One big difference is that the Orca Straw stage in the ski village was taken out and replaced with the Casa Fiesta, which was a members-only room dedicated to what I would say is Latin music as a whole. The music in said room was dynamic, and players standing near the instruments laid about would play individual parts of a salsa song. Mountain Expedition. In August, the game had an event where players were challenged to scale one of Club Penguin's most dangerous mountains. The expedition took place over a few rooms, and had a couple small puzzles to solve on the way. At the top of the mountain, you could have your picture taken, and doing so would give you a top of the mountain background, which I think is a cute way of tying the player card background mechanic to the physical world of the game. Also, for whatever reason, the town and plaza's decorations were weirdly similar to how they were during the Festival of Flight. I genuinely wonder if this party is supposed to be a successor to it. Both parties involve going to the top of one of the game's mountains, so it would make sense. The Fair 2010. There's not really much I can say about this party that can't be said about the previous fairs. It was pretty standard fare, pun intended. The most I can say is that the decorations were a bit tuned down, and some of the games were moved around. There were some different rewards too. None of this is a big deal to me though. The fair rocks nonetheless. Stadium games. To coincide with the release of Club Penguin Game Day for the Nintendo Wii, the stadium was changed up to host a tournament between the red, blue, green, and yellow teams. The competitive events included drilling into a panel with your team's color, throwing snowballs at targets, and a 100-meter race. That does not look like 100 meters. 5th Anniversary Party. Once again, Club Penguin held an anniversary party in October. Also, once again, they advertised it as being one day only, but it was not one day only. I really like the more diverse color scheme this time around. The party hat given out this year had more colors on it than any hat shown before. I remember thinking it was really cool that they showed all the hats on display in the coffee shop for the event. The developers of this game definitely knew how prestigious the beta hat was. The Great Storm of 2010. Like the last few years, there was a storm that formed above the island just in time for Halloween. The storm was bigger than it had ever been and lasted way longer than just the Halloween party. A few weeks, in fact. The game then had its first rainfall in history, and not just for the players, it was the first documented rainfall in the game's canon, which probably meant it had something to do with ninja magic, but we'll get back to that. Halloween Party 2010. The Halloween party this year wasn't too different from last year. The two biggest visual changes are the fact that the haunted house was given its own room between the forest and mine shack, and the iceberg was replaced with a gigantic pumpkin. Like usual, there was a candy scavenger hunt, but there was also a members-only maze added with a few puzzles that could be solved. One part of the challenge was traversing a pitch-black room that could be lit up either with a lantern item or night vision goggles if you had a pair. If you can't tell, small adventures were becoming a common occurrence for parties around this time. Also, this was the first year where there was no new installment in the Night of the Living Sled series, which is not actually that big of a deal, but it's worth mentioning. Sensei's Water Scavenger Hunt. After a few weeks of constant cloudy skies, the storm finally left Club Penguin. Sensei took the reign as a sign that it was time to teach ninjas how to play Cardjutsu Water, and began collecting the excess water from the rain to build the water dojo, and players could participate in a scavenger hunt to help out. Eventually, the construction came to an end, and Cardjutsu Water was finally released. Thankfully, the rollout didn't take 3 months this time. Sadly, I never became a water ninja, because the minigame's performance on my computer was atrocious. It was super laggy and unresponsive, even when the game's graphic settings were at minimum, which is basically what everyone had to do. It's a shame. I feel like I was never able to give this game a fair shot because of how it ran. Holiday Party 2010. Not unlike a lot of parties throughout this year, the holiday party's decorations were pretty much the same as they were in 2009, and in the case of some rooms, there was less decoration. The biggest change I can really point out is that they went hard on the coins for change flexing this year. There were a lot of tubes hanging around the island to facilitate the transfer of coins donated to Coins for Change, and throughout the party's duration, the lighthouse would be progressively filled with coins as more and more donations had been made. Also, I don't know if this was just to check a box or something, but they added a new party room this time around that is a bit puzzling. It has no name, very little information about it, no items, nothing really except a gigantic Christmas tree. If you threw snowballs, the snowballs turned into ornaments though. New Year's Day 2011. This year's New Year was basically the exact same as it was last year, so yeah, not much to say. Next! Wilderness Expedition. The last two puffles introduced to this game were the white and orange puffles, and the two of them pretty much had the same lead up, just a year apart. This time around, they decided to get a bit ahead and introduce the brown puffle a little early, and I think it was a good move, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Short quests, for lack of a better word, were becoming a pretty common occurrence at this point, but this one specifically had quite a bit more meat on its bones than, say, the mountain expedition from a few months earlier. Obviously, the reward being a whole new puffle was a big part of that, but there were more rooms to explore and puzzles to solve in between. I remember really liking this one, and also filming a Linkin Park fan music video in the maze while it was going on. Puffle Party 2011. Something fun about this year's Puffle Party is that unlike the last 2 years, where the new puffles were introduced right after the Puffle Party, the brown puffle was already adoptable and was able to get its own room from the start. And of course, there were new attractions made for orange puffles as well. Cadence was also meetable during this party, and she could be met on the nightclub's rooftop. Pet Shop Rebuild. Alright, brace yourselves for an old head opinion. Right after the Puffle Party, the pet shop went under renovations, and it came out looking completely different. And you know, I've never been a fan. There's a little bit too much going on in the main area for my personal tastes. I don't want to talk your ear off about the evolution of Club Penguin's art style, and how sometimes, in my opinion, the need to fill what is seen as empty space in a vacuum just ends up making things look cluttered. Well, actually I do want to do that, but that's not what this video is about. Either way, the silver lining to this change is the introduction of Puffle Launch, which I think is my favorite post-2010 minigame. April Fool's Party 2011. For this year's April Fool's Party, members were able to go on a multi-dimensional scavenger hunt through all sorts of bizarre worlds, like the candy dimension, the stair dimension, or even the cream soda dimension. I've talked to you guys about Club Penguin's box thing, but I haven't really brought up its cream soda thing. Doing the scavenger hunt would net you a box costume. Also, even though he had been an established character for years now, Rookie was finally introduced as a meetable mascot character during this party, and he will continue appearing now and then from this point forward. Easter Egg Hunt 2011. In case you didn't notice, there was no Easter Egg Hunt held in 2010. However, it returned this year with a small twist, and I literally mean small twist in this case. Instead of getting a bunny hood for collecting all of the eggs, players were rewarded with the Safari Park background, which had something to do with the other event that took place at basically the exact same time as this one. Earth Day 2011. During the Easter Egg Hunt this year, Club Penguin also held an Earth Day party. Last year focused on the benefits of recycling, if you Couldn't tell by the recycling t-shirts, but this year there was a special focus on the conservation of threatened species like the African painted dog and the snow leopard, and I'll admit, I found the drawings the art team made of these animals to be very, very cute. More importantly, Club Penguin also donated a sum of $100,000 to wildlife initiatives for the event, on top of the $360,000 they donated the previous holiday season during Coins for Change. Medieval Party 2011. The decorations for this year's party were more or less the same, except the occasional accommodation made for newly added minigames or routes between rooms. That being said, they added a third Knight's Quest this year that involved fighting a mechanical Hydra. It was cool, very cool. And once again, the other Knight's Quests were still very much playable for newcomers and veterans alike. One thing they also did for this party was redecorate the recycling plant, which is not something they had done before. It was recontextualized as kind of a smithy where Knight's armor was forged, and I think that's cute. Battle of Doom. They must have been really proud of the Hydra boss battle from the Medieval Party, because literally the day after it came to a close, the game hosted a small mission where agents had to battle Herbert P. Bear after he stole the Hydra equipment and launched an attack on the EPF's headquarters. The battle was more difficult than the Medieval Party one, and upon completion you would be rewarded with an EPF pin and one of the Hydra heads as a furniture item. This was the first EPF in-game mission event, and boy, they did not stop here. Music Jam 2011. Unlike most of the other Music Jams which started in July, this year's Music Jam started in mid-June, but it ended in July because this party went on for 3 weeks. I'm pretty sure this is the longest Club Penguin party up to this point. Yep, this is the longest one so far. Not a complaint though. If there's any party to do for 3 weeks, it's this one. Also, and this doesn't have anything to do with the party, but because I remember it so well, I want to talk about it. On June 20th, while this party was going on, the game's domain went down for several hours, and any player who tried to log in that day would be greeted with a welcome page very much unlike what they had gotten used to. I'll never forget the random clip art clown I saw on my computer. Apparently, Disney just forgot to renew the domain despite several warnings, and eventually the site was just taken down. It was kind of embarrassing for the company, but it was all over by the next day. Island Adventure Party 2011. The third Island Adventure Party was pretty similar in basic presentation to the second, but I will say that I really prefer the rewards given this year. Last year's treasure map scavenger hunt was replaced with a hunt held throughout the event, where penguins were tasked with helping Rockhopper find his cream soda by deciphering a bunch of written clues. Yeah, the cream soda thing strikes again. Great Snow Race and Operation Hibernation. It's a little unfortunate. I have, no memory of this event at all, and I know I did it too because all the items you got in the process were items that I had. It's weird that I don't really remember it because it was honestly a super unique in-game event, especially for the time, given that this was the first ever EPF operation party in the game's history. But besides that, they kinda made this a 2-in-1 event. The mountain area from last year's mountain expedition became visitable again, and penguins could climb it and sled race down. But at the same time, elite Penguin Force agents could branch off and go on a mission to infiltrate Herbert P. Bear's whereabouts, and try to get him to hibernate by freezing the place up. Although, technically, polar bears don't hibernate, at least not in the traditional sense. They actually acknowledged this a few years later in the Club Penguin Times. The Fair 2011. I've been saying a lot for the past year's worth of parties that a lot of the new parties are recycling assets, and I want to clarify again that when I say that, it's not a complaint. It's more so just for a lack of things to say in a way of keeping track of how the game changed over time. I was prepared to say the same thing about this year's fair, but they actually did a lot of redecorating, and it's an interesting look at the changing design philosophies for the game. There were a handful of rooms that were completely redrawn but decorated more or less the same way, and I personally find it interesting to compare and contrast the small decisions made. Anyway, yeah, this is a great fair. They added a unicycle to the game this year. I love that. I'm not even being sarcastic when I say that. I love the fact that they added a unicycle to Club Penguin. Halloween Party 2011. Like the fair this year, the Halloween party didn't add too much in terms of new challenges or mechanics, but there were a lot of visual changes in terms of the decorations, especially with the oldest and most important rooms. A lot more dead trees, I can tell you that much. The snow forts were also turned into a small neighborhood where players could pretend to trick or treat. There were no new party-specific rooms or anything, but the scavenger hunt was changed up a bit, with players now hunting down candy ghosts instead of just candy. They're ghosts this time, but made of candy or something. Something kinda weird about this party is that there was a storm like usual visible in-game, but there didn't seem to be any newspaper or lore buildup like there had been the years previous. I suppose it's not a big deal, and trying to turn it into an exciting event 4 years in a row was not really necessary. Like last year, there also was no new installment in the Night of the Living Sled series, but they did actually have a Night of the Living Sled stage play. 6th Anniversary Party. In case you haven't been paying attention to the time frames I've been putting with each new party throughout this video, the parties have been getting longer and longer. I mean, I mentioned the 3-week music jam earlier, but that's just an extreme example. Most of the major parties this year have been pushing 2 weeks, which was not a thing in 2005, I can tell you that much. The reason I'm bringing this up though, is that the extended length of the Halloween party this year led to the 6th anniversary party taking place during the Halloween party. It's like a Matryoshka doll of Club Penguin parties. Because of this, the decorations this year went all in on the whole Halloween thing, and I think that made for an interesting direction. The Halloween-themed party hat looks very unique, and the cake's design is awesome. Card Jitsu Party 2011. So, for the past 3 years, there was always a new Card Jitsu game introduced around this time of year. But sadly, Card Jitsu Snow was not ready for launch. In fact, it was nowhere near ready. It would take almost another 2 years to be finished. So in the meantime, they just decided to throw a Card Jitsu themed party where penguins all over were encouraged to train hard and hone their Card Jitsu skills. The island became a fire versus water training arena where ninjas sparred and many buildings were redesigned to resemble the architecture of historical Japan. Non-members were also temporarily allowed to play Card Jitsu Fire and Water, which was a nice gesture. Holiday Party 2011. The holiday party this year broke a lot of new ground. As I said earlier, it reached a new record for the amount of free items given to all players with a staggering 15, most of which could be obtained through the advent calendar in the forest. A lot of rooms had new decorations done, and there was even a bakery room added for the party where members were allowed to go and make cookies. It's kind of funny that only paid members are allowed to go in the back and perform the labor. Even Herbert, still under EPF captivity, had some festivities going on of his own. Also, Coins for Change was once again a big part, and this year Disney made a donation of $2 million instead of just $1 million. New Year's Day 2012. 2012 is a big year in the game's history, and it was kicked off by a big New Year's event. Time-wise, I mean. It wasn't super different from the others, it was just a lot longer. So, in a sense bigger, you know. Underwater Expedition. So, Rookie, for whatever reason, was tasked with running this year's expedition, but because he's Rookie, he accidentally made a few errors. He collected a bunch of anvils and put them on the beach, I think, to assist in the effort, but all that accomplished was the entire island getting completely lopsided, which is a really amusing visual gag. The expedition involved exploring the ocean surrounding the island, and players who found their way out of the underwater maze would be awarded with a submarine costume. Fashion Show. This was a small event held right after the underwater expedition where the gift shop was turned into a runway for a fashion show. Cadence actually played a big role in the whole thing, which is kind of funny to me. She doesn't really give me a fashionista vibe, but whatever. Rockhopper's Quest. We had a lot of nautical adventures at the start of this year. In February, players were able to join Rockhopper on a voyage around Club Penguin's oceans to the uncharted Shipwreck Island. Doing so involved leaving Club Penguin, getting supplies at the Swashbuckler Trading Post, surviving Dinosaur Island, and sailing to the aforementioned Shipwreck Island. The reason for the trek was to install a beacon on the island to make it easier for Rockhopper to navigate the waters overnight, and once it came to an end, you could see the new beacon when looking through the lighthouse telescope. Puffle Party 2012. This year's Puffle Party was definitely a big one. A lot of the traditional attractions were revamped or moved around, and there was a new room called the Puffle Play Zone where players could turn into their Puffle and eat, drink, and be merry. You can very much see them demoing the whole Puffle Hotel thing here that would be added the following year. PH was also formally introduced to the game as a meetable mascot. She had originally appeared in the DS games and since then had been occasionally mentioned, but this was the first time she could be met in the main game. There was also a small attraction for St. Patrick's Day over at the Mine Shack. April Fool's Party 2012. Sadly, this was the last April Fool's Party, and it was kind of a small-scale thing. Historically, you would see a lot of the rooms messed around with for these events, but the island remained mostly untouched this time. The main focus was dimension hopping like last year, and there were a couple new dimensions added, those being the Orange Puffle dimension and the Zany Funhouse dimension. Easter Egg Hunt 2012. Club Penguin had its final Easter egg hunt this year, and it was pretty much the same as it usually was. In fact, they reused the design for the eggs from the 2009 and 2011 hunts. They did have a slightly updated interface for the hunt itself though, I imagine because they wanted to stop using the legacy scavenger hunt UI. The reward this year was yellow bunny ears. Earth Day 2012. Club Penguin had its third and final Earth Day party this year. The decorations were pretty small scale this time around, honestly. The only really decorated room was the Snow Force, which had been altered to resemble the natural habitats of some of the newly highlighted threatened species like lions and rockhopper penguins. Literal rockhopper penguins. Like, not rockhopper, rockhopper. As I said, this was the final Earth Day party, which is a bit of a shame, although I wasn't particularly surprised. Not to diss the game and their efforts to raise environmental awareness, but I imagine they weren't that popular, and it was more profitable to spend time on other parties. That being said, I don't want to give the impression that they stopped making donations to conservation efforts here, because they absolutely did not. They would continue doing so even without the parties. Medieval Party 2012. Historically, the medieval parties in Club Penguin's history were done for fun. It was like a medieval fair, but it was all willing. The party, in canon, was thrown on purpose. This time around, however, the island turned into a fantasy world because it was taken over by an evil dragon of legends, and there was a genuine threat the island was facing. This wasn't like a robotic dragon built by Gary. It was an actual straight-up dragon that canonically used to rule over the island of Club Penguin. But what that dragon didn't know is that dragon flying is weak to ice, and the icy penguin soon vanquished him and saved the day. You could tell that Club Penguin was right in the thick of a complete visual overhaul during this party, because while some rooms looked like this, other rooms looked like this. Our little penguin game was evolving. Also, if you looked through the telescope at the Wizard's Tower, you would see a mysterious meteor making its way to the island. This played a role in next month's party. Meteor Strike. The mysterious meteor crashed into the island about a week after the medieval party, and the impact site could be visited at the dock. No one got hurt, apparently. In fact, you could argue the opposite happened, because the meteorite somehow gave everybody superpowers. Well, it gave paid members superpowers. Marvel Superhero Takeover 2012. Alright, so this is kind of a turning point for the game. In June, Club Penguin had its first sponsored party, or takeover, and these are a little bit controversial in some circles. I think the idea of cross-promotion, even when done sparingly, is always easy to criticize as it's a moment where it's very clear there is money changing hands to the audience, and making a move such as this after almost 7 years of not doing this is a big change that's easy to point out. I will say though, that I cannot look at this party and say it's just some soulless cash grab. So many game personnel talk about this party like it's one of the most ambitious projects they ever attempted at that point, and I very much believe them. I think although sponsored parties eventually did attract some negative attention from fans, a Marvel superhero tie-in coinciding with the releases of the 2012 Avengers movie and The Amazing Spider-Man, where members could dress up as featured characters and take on the roles of superheroes or supervillains, was a pretty good place to start. It was an incredibly popular party, and I can personally attest that I had a blast. Make Your Mark Ultimate Jam. I'm sure it's probably not necessary to say it, but just in case you haven't gotten the impression, these past few parties have had a lot of moving parts. No longer are the days where a few rooms would have simple decorations and there'd be like one free item. Parties were huge events now, and certain rooms on the island would often be completely unrecognizable from their usual look. Like, it took me several seconds to realize that this room is supposed to be the forest. Anyway, the Ultimate Jam, if you can't tell, is just a music jam with the pop focus kicked up to 11. The game had its first tie-in song with lyrics for the party sung by Cadence called The Party Starts Now, which was performed both in-game and in an animated music video uploaded online. I bought it on iTunes. There was a major Disney Channel tie-in, and CeCe and Rocky from Shake It Up were meetable mascots throughout its duration, which makes me a bit curious if everyone in the Club Penguin universe version of Earth is just a penguin. Like, are the penguin versions of CeCe and Rocky still from Chicago? Where does the actual TV show's lore fit in this? Anyway, it's still a music jam and I love the music jams, but I remember starting to get pretty cynical about this party when I was a kid. I thought trying to fit Disney Channel characters into the Club Penguin puzzle was a little bit too much, and even now I think it kinda is. The daily quests were still pretty fun though, and there were a lot of cool rewards. Adventure Party, Temple of Fruit. You probably wouldn't get the impression based on the title alone, but this year's Adventure Party was also sponsored. It was a much smaller one though, and the only reason I knew is because I was very tapped in, frankly. Also because the sponsorship items were only accessible to British players because I don't think Innocent Smoothies, the company Club Penguin collaborated with, has products sold outside of the UK. Maybe in Europe. Definitely not in the US. Either way, the party itself was not region locked and it was a big departure from the previous adventure parties. There was a lot of fruit. You had to throw fruits at some weird volcano demon to stop it from taking over the island. And if you were a member, you were able to explore a mysterious fruit temple and just go full Indiana Jones. Thanks for going full Indiana Jones, Think Noodles. All in all, I remember liking this one a lot. I remember being skeptical when it was only known as a fruit party a few months earlier, but once we realized it was going to be an adventure party, I was pretty won over. Smoothie Smash grand opening. Halfway through the adventure party, the coffee shop got a complete overhaul and a new minigame called Smoothie Smash was introduced. In Smoothie Smash, you crushed fruit to make smoothies with your butt. And, I kinda hated this a lot. The game was fine, but I was furious about the change to the scenery, to the extent that I made a funeral video for the old coffee shop during this party. Nowadays, I'm definitely more sympathetic to the change, but I'm still more partial to the old coffee shop, although that could very well just be nostalgia. The game Smoothie Smash would from then on be playable in the coffee shop, but for the remainder of the adventure party, it was also playable at the Cove, Dock, and Forest. The Fair 2012. The 6th fair took place later in September, and unlike the last 3 parties, it was actually not sponsored. I remember being happy about that. It was almost entirely unchanged from last year, to be honest, just with a few different prizes and Rookie being a meetable mascot instead of Rockhopper. I'm not complaining though, I found it refreshingly familiar as a kid after things got so shaken up over the summer. Literally. Halloween Party 2012. There were a lot of changes this Halloween. There was no haunted house or dark chamber this time around, and those areas were replaced with a gigantic haunted mansion, which apparently belonged to Gary the Gadget Guy's great uncle, Gary Wald VIII. Gary Wald VIII, yeah. The quest was available to all players, but members who found their way to Gary Wald's Ghost Lab were able to use the Ghostmatron and turn to ghosts, and there were special rewards given for haunting the island in the form. There was also a new tie-in song by the Penguin Band featuring Cadence called Ghosts Just Want to Dance. 7th Anniversary Party. Even though this party also took place during the Halloween party like last year's, they decided to not make it Halloween themed again, which I think was a good call. I think the Halloween thing would have run thin very fast. The decorations this year were honestly kind of modest. I mean, the cake is a lot smaller than it used to be, which is a little bit ironic, because this was one of the biggest years in the game's history. In fact, the game was about to reach the highest number of concurrent logged in players of all time. Operation Blackout. I don't even know where to start here. There's a lot to this party. I guess my starting point for Operation Blackout is that you can very easily describe the history of Club Penguin as before Operation Blackout and after Operation Blackout. The story goes that Herbert P. Bear Esquire, after escaping EPF captivity and several months of planning, built a gigantic laser machine that would steal light from the sun and shroud the island in darkness. The machine also could harness the sun's energy, and he used it to destroy the EPF headquarters. Several of the EPF higher-ups were kidnapped, and it was up to the player to break into Herbert P. Bear's headquarters and put a stop to his plans, or let him destroy the island forever. Oh, that's cool. I think one of the things that astounds me about this event is the sense of just bleakness. As the weeks went by, the island got colder and colder and the snow just kept piling. I think on some level we all knew there was going to be an eventual happy ending, but I don't think the game had ever tried to feel this pessimistic and downtrodden. Sure, in past months we had had events where we pretended there were new villains, but it was always really silly. Like, yeah, we need to save Club Penguin from this evil fruit volcano kahuna thing. Sure. This was different, and when you finally save the day, discover the director's true identity, and see sunlight reaching the island again, you can tell the game was trying to make you feel things it had never tried to make you feel before. I've already talked about this event longer than any other party in the game's history for this video, and I still feel like I'm barely scratching the surface. I mentioned earlier how Club Penguin's history can be split into pre-blackout and post-blackout, and there's a lot of reasons for that I don't have a lot of time for. But one of the biggest reasons is that in the aftermath of the event, pretty much all of the outdoor areas in the game were completely redesigned. They had started doing this through the last year or two with a lot of indoor areas, but they bit the bullet right here. They canonically explained it by saying that the construction penguins decided to overhaul the buildings to be more robust after such a security threat. It was slick, to be honest. I'll give them that. I admittedly have mixed feelings about this overhaul. Honestly, in my more cynical moments, I've called it the soda-sopa-ification of Club Penguin. But to its credit, it does look pretty good. I find renaming the gift shop and nightclub to be a little silly though. Holiday Party 2012. 2012 was an incredibly ambitious year that was wrapped up with an incredibly ambitious party. There were a lot of things to do this year. Of course, staples from the past were still accessible, but there was a plethora of new attractions as well. At the bakery, penguins could transform into toy cars, reindeer puffles, or frostbites, and the coins they spent for the transformation would count as coins for change donations. Interestingly, Santa's sled was no longer accessible from the nightclub this year and was now approached through the ski lodge, which makes a lot more sense in retrospect. This was also the introduction of temporary party-specific emotes, which would from this point forward become a regular thing for every in-game party. Also, there was another tie-in song featuring the frostbites. I still really don't know what those were supposed to be. New Year's Day 2013. Things actually got changed up this new year. There were fireworks as usual, but they could only be seen at the snow fort this year where the Coins for Change bakery was. Kinda interesting. Prehistoric Party 2013. The mysterious meteor from last year became relevant again when Gary the Gadget Guy used its energy to create a time machine, and he set the destination time to the prehistoric era. Because of this, the main island was mostly unchanged for this event, and most of the party was only accessible when you took your penguin back in time. In the prehistoric Club Penguin, you could play a minigame where you dig for treasure and dinosaur eggs, and you could use the dinosaur eggs to turn your penguin into a dinosaur. They really loved transformations at this point in the game's history. Also, it was around this time that Club Penguin finally locked in its new art style for illustrations, where the solid black lines were almost entirely replaced with colored line art. Hollywood Party. The theme this month was movies, and members were able to become movie stars. There was a whole quest line basically where you would have to go to different sets, put on an outfit, and then shoot scenes at different locations. After a week, there was even an awards show that was put on. I think one of the things I personally found neat about this party is that there was literally a limo room you could enter that would take you around the island. It was a really unique idea, and although, yeah, you could just use your map, it provided a different experience. Low-key, it kinda gives me New Pork City vibes. The EPF rebuild. Over the next, year, the EPF headquarters and at some points the outer ski village went under construction, as the EPF rebuilt following Herbert P. Baer's actions during Operation Blackout. It took a long time, but you could see the area progressively change throughout the year, and at the end of it, the Elite Penguin Force HQ and the Everyday Phoning Facility were completely renovated. You might be expecting Nostalgia Me to complain, but honestly, I never really grew attached to these areas, so I didn't mind much. Red Nose Day. This was a small charity event held at the coffee shop for a few weeks where penguins were encouraged to take the stage of the coffee shop and do stand-up, with a red nose of course. For every single screenshot of a penguin telling jokes on stage sent to Disney UK, they would donate £1 to Comic Relief, which is a British charity organization that runs telethons hosted by comedians. Puffle Party 2013. It had been a couple of years since we last got a new type of adoptable puffle, but that was about to change. It was about to drastically change. In the weeks leading up to the Puffle Party, rainbow puffles began being sighted around the island. Because of that, the Puffle handler did some research and found out there was a cloud of rainbow puffles making its way to Club Penguin. And of course, she did the most obvious thing one would do to try and see it firsthand: build a fully featured hotel for puffles with a cannon at the top that would shoot you to the cloud. Apparently. The Puffle Hotel opened the same day as the Puffle Party, and members who pampered their puffle sufficiently were allowed to cannon over to the cloud and adopt a rainbow puffle. This ended up becoming a permanent fixture in the game that will continue being available even after the party ended. Other than the whole rainbow puffle thing, the party was pretty similar to last year's. Some room decorations had to be changed owing to their new base designs, but not all of them, which I admittedly found a little funny. There was a tie-in song called Gotta Have a Wingman for this party, and Herbert P. Baer did Gangnam Style. Also, for whatever reason, the Puffle Show didn't return this year. Operation Hot Sauce. Right as the Puffle Party came to an end, a new EPF mission took place, where penguins had to retrieve a stolen bottle of hot sauce from the pizza parlor. Herbert stole it to power his lair or something. One thing I really liked about this operation is that they integrated a lot of the gameplay elements that were prevalent in the original point-and-click missions that frankly, I had grown to miss. It's not a super long mission, but you have to do things like gather clues and solve problems in a way that we hadn't really seen outside of the first-person missions up to this point. I think it really brought back an element that a lot of the EPF stuff had been lacking for me personally. Thumbs up. Marvel Superhero Takeover 2013. I gotta admit, I'm kinda surprised how extensive this one is. Given that it's been over a decade, I had forgotten how different this party really was from how it was in 2012. Not just different, but much larger in scale. Pretty much everything last year was amped up, and the challenges and quests were entirely changed from the previous Marvel party. They also depended on whether the player was a hero or a villain, and both sides had their own tie-in minigame to help either destroy or save the island. Of course, by the way, there were a ton of new superhero outfits introduced, with a special emphasis on Iron Man outfits because Iron Man 3 came out during this party. Card Jitsu Party 2013. After a good 2.5 years of waiting, the new Card Jitsu game finally came out. And in terms of storytelling, this was a huge step up from the previous games. Card Jitsu had, like, a bad guy now. Big changes. The dojo was covered in an avalanche once again, which hadn't happened in like 5 years and also this time was intentional. As I said, the bad guy. The decorations were pretty similar to how they were in 2011, but there had to be some adjustments to accommodate how much the game had changed since then. The ski village side of the island, which was undecorated last time, was turned into the snow turf, so to speak. Also, Card Jitsu Fire and Water became available for both members and non-members alike when this party happened. Not just for the party either, they both became permanently available for all players, which is a sweet gesture. Monsters University Takeover. I'm not trying to be excessively negative for this video, but I think a promotional party dedicated to the singular Monsters University movie is a little bit too much for me personally. I think these parties really start to peel away at the setting of Club Penguin in my view. Like, why exactly is this frozen island now a temperate college campus with fraternities? Why, canonically, are we dressing up as monsters? They don't even really try to fit it in the game narratively besides one mini article in the newspaper. I suppose the physical impossibility of party decorations hasn't really bothered me in the past, so I don't know. It's not super important. Anyway, as I said, the game is basically turned into a college town for this party, and players were invited to participate in the scare games and play for one of the 4 main fraternities and sororities from the film. The points scored for each team were tallied up after the first week or so, and it turns out that Uzma Kappa won. I imagine because they were kind of the main one from the movie. In the aftermath of this party, there was a school area added to the game that replaced the recycling plant at the mine shack. They kind of turned the mine shack area into like a school campus. There's a children yearning for the mines joke there somewhere. Star Wars Takeover. Admittedly, I think I'm biased when it comes to these parties, because I'm a lot more receptive to the idea of Club Penguin Star Wars than I am Club Penguin Monsters University, even though the given circumstances of this party narratively are basically just as silly and make as much sense. And I like Monsters University, but, like, Star Wars. You basically get to reenact A New Hope in Club Penguin, except with Darth Herbert and, like, Caden's Princess Leia. Sensei Obi-Wan? It's very clear that the team was having fun with this party, to be honest. And the fans. There were so many bells and whistles both in the game and in the promotional material, and given the theme, I'm not the slightest bit surprised. And you know, given that Disney formally acquired Lucasfilm less than a year before this party, I imagine they were very quick on the draw with this collaboration. It's probably why this party went on for 3 whole weeks. Teen Beach Movie Summer Jam. These parties are really getting smushed together. Only a week after the Star Wars Takeover, Club Penguin had another tie-in sponsor party. This time focused on Teen Beach Movie, which, for those of you who don't know, was a Disney Channel original movie that had just come out. I was really cynical about this when it happened because I was kind of approaching that age where you basically hate all television that has children as a target audience. But honestly, in this party's defense, Teen Beach Movie was like really popular. One of the 5 most viewed Disney Channel original movies, actually. The setting of the island was altered to resemble the locations in the film, and players were able to meet penguin versions of the 2 lead characters. There were also rooms added where you could bike and surf, which was pretty cool, I'll admit. Something both Spike Hike and Polo Field stressed to fans is that they envision this party as like a fusion of the summer party and the music jam, which I kinda see. More so the summer party. I think the music jam thing is a bit of a stretch, but they probably had a lot of fans breathing down their necks complaining about the fact that there was no normal music jam this year, so they wanted to rectify it some way. I don't really blame them. Medieval Party 2013. The 6th and final Medieval Party, and the only one that didn't take place in May. And honestly, it was very different from the previous ones. That seemed to be a pattern this year. There were not a lot of returning parties, and the parties that did return were really shaken up. For this party, Rockhopper came across a mysterious magic spellbook on his adventures that was written by one of Gary's relatives, Garyana. The Gary relative thing was becoming a bit of a running gag. Gary got a hold of the book and turned the school into a giant wizard academy, and players were tasked with creating all sorts of different potions that would transform them into things like puffle creatures, ogre-sized penguins, and even a dragon. The decorations this year were almost entirely new, with one exception being the nightclub, which was using basically the same design it had had since 2008, despite the nightclub being totally made over since then. Not really a problem. In fact, it's a nice piece of history. Something kinda sad though, is that a lot of former medieval staples didn't make their return this year, like the treetop forts and Knight's Quests, and I don't really get why. I think the philosophy of how these parties were being designed and what content should stay and go was drastically changing, to be honest. Halloween Party 2013. Once again, a lot of things got changed around for this party compared to the last one in terms of activities and decorations. They also stayed old school for the nightclub decorations specifically. I'm starting to be convinced that that was like an inside joke. The main activity for this party was trick-or-treating around the island to collect candy. The generic candy could be used as currency to buy a bunch of cosmetics, but certain special candies let you transform into a werewolf, zombie, or vampire. 8th Anniversary Party. Club Penguin turned 8 in the middle of the Halloween party, and to celebrate, the coffee shop put up some decorations. The main color scheme this year was rainbow, and there was a significant celebration of the game's history, to be honest. You could get your penguin's photo taken in front of a background based on the old design of the town, and there was a special display of a mannequin draped in a lot of the game's oldest items, and I like that. Admittedly, I probably come off as a bit more negative about this era of the game than I really mean to, but I will say that although the game had become a good bit different from the one I'd grown up with in the past year or two, I really appreciate how they were still willing to celebrate the game's history here. There was also a tie-in song sung by Jordan Fisher. Festival of Lights. For the first 3 weeks of November, fireworks were visible on the Iceberg, Beacon, and Ski Hill to celebrate... I kinda don't know. There wasn't really like any reason for the event said in the blog post. I guess we were just partying for partying's sake, which I'm not against, to be fair. November 2013 Tremors and the Quest for the Gold Puffle. In the aftermath of the Halloween party, a series of tremors hit the island, which apparently were caused by penguins who were transformed into zombies jumping around or something. As a result, the cave mine entrance was sealed up again, and this was actually the last time we would ever see it, because a week later, the mine would be renovated and the gold mine replaced the cave mine. At the same time, gold puffles were officially made adoptable in the game, and you could get one by having your puffle dig up a bunch of gold nuggets, which would then be used to power a golden jackhammer, which would drill a puffle-shaped rock and unearth a gold puffle. Operation Puffle. So, Herbert P. Bear built a bunch of mind control devices that he used to control puffles and force them to dig up coins for him. EPF agents were tasked with entering the game's wilderness and saving the puffles from his control, which would be done in a short minigame for each color. Golden puffles could help out too. Eventually, after rescuing 5 of each main puffle type, you could reverse engineer the mind control devices and turn his captive puffles against him, saving Club Penguin once again. They gave you some good money for it too. Holiday Party 2013. Once again, the holiday party closed out the year. Although, like a lot of returning parties this year, certain features from previous years were taken out. The bakery and Santa sled didn't actually return this year. Also, there weren't any transformations. There was a new Coins for Change challenge, where a whole bunch of items would be given to all players if the total amount of coins donated reached certain milestones, and this worked stupendously. Within a couple of days, 10 billion coins were donated already, and it kept going. This also likely had to do with the fact that there was a temporary minigame introduced where players could form trains and gather coins which would be immediately donated. But honestly, I'd wager it was mostly the first thing. New Year's Day 2014. Like last year, the fireworks were at the snow forts instead of the historic Iceberg and Ski Hill locations. It's actually kinda hard to see them because the Coins for Change train station was so big. It hogs up the entire visible sky. Prehistoric Party 2014. The Prehistoric Party came back this year, and there were a few new twists. For one, the prehistoric version of Club Penguin Island got partially redesigned and had some new rooms added. New dinosaur transformations were added as well. The big thing this year was that dinosaur puffles were discovered, and they became the first adoptable puffle creatures, and boy, were they not the last. They could be adopted by players digging up dino puffle eggs and taking them to the volcano to be incubated, with the helpful advice of Gary's 11 times great uncle, Garug the Ugg Ugg. He's probably my favorite in the family. The Fair 2014. Now, I'll be totally honest, I was not happy that there was no fair last year. In fact, I was very unhappy. Fortunately, they squeezed it in this year during February, and it came back with a certain vengeance. The island was mostly undecorated except for the obvious change in time of day, but an entire location opened up called the Amazement Park, which took the fair's presentation to a whole new level. All the fan-favorite old games returned, some with a slight redesign to fit the new aesthetic, and they could be found around the park. Several of the amusement park rooms had their own built-in games which could be played for tickets, and there was even a roller coaster and Ferris wheel added that may not have given tickets but were fun spectacles nonetheless. Russian Welcome Event. In March, Russian-speaking servers were officially added to the game. To celebrate, the ice rink was decorated with some Russian paraphernalia, and Ushanka-style hats were given out for free. Sadly, Russian servers would be taken out of the game just the following year. Muppets World Tour. Okay, so, the sponsored half of this party did not win me over. Admittedly, I was entirely checked out with the takeovers by this time. Not to be negative, but yeah, it was the new norm for the game and I was used to it by now. Sure, Kermit the Frog is in Club Penguin. Fine. I gotta say though, although I didn't feel anything about the quest where you help the individual characters practice their acts, I thought turning the island into something like the Epcot World Showcase was, well, a fun idea with or without any promotional tie-ins. Seeing the rooms redesigned to resemble countries like Britain, France, Mexico, India, and even Brazil was very cool and made this party a lot more interesting to me personally. Obviously, I'm not super partial to the Muppet outfits, but a lot of the other ideas introduced during this party tickled my fancy. Puffle Party 2014. The Puffle Party returned for the second half of April, and it once again brought a couple new features. The main attraction for most players, I imagine, were the dog and cat Puffles being introduced, which apparently found their way onto the island after stowing away on the migrator. But this was not the only thing. Puffle tricks were formally added to the game, and the stage was turned into the Puffle Gala as a place for those to be performed. Also, the Puffle Park was added to the game as a new room adjacent to the pet shop. The plaza is getting kinda crowded. Mechanically, it was just an extension of the Puffle Hotel, but I think it's a lot more fun to have your Puffle play here than putting it on the treadmill. No offense to the cardio lovers out there. I should note that the decorations this year were completely overhauled. Like a lot of parties in this era of the game, the amount of rooms that were decorated is a bit less than it used to be, but the extent at which the rooms get redecorated is a lot higher. They didn't bring back the old gimmick of dedicating each room to one type of Puffle, but in my opinion, moving away from that gave them the opportunity to try a lot of new ideas which were really cool. Funny Hat Week. This was a small event held at the dock right after the Puffle Party, where penguins celebrated the simple pleasures of wearing silly hats. A bunch of silly hats were given out for free, and penguins were able to hold competitions over who had the silliest hat.
We're gonna go into a hat store and try on silly hats.
Okay.
That's fun, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something, is that fun
Yeah, let's do
for
it.
you? Okay, let's go.
Future Party. Gary the Gadget Guy seems to have really taken a liking to time travel. In the lead up to this party, Gary went to the year 4014 and met his future self, and it turned out that future Club Penguin needed the help of past Club Penguin to save the planet from an assault of meteoroids launched by the evil Protobot 10,000 while piloting a bunch of customizable mechs. I hope we all understand, though, that this is all canonically Gary's fault, and his mistakes endangered the world of Club Penguin for over 2,000 years. In between missions saving the planet, penguins were able to explore the future version of Club Penguin, and it is evident they went all out with the sci-fi aesthetics. Penguin Prom. In the middle of June, Club Penguin had, a prom over at the Mine Shack. It was a small event, but it gave out a few free items like a graduation cap, because it was also a school graduation. It was a cute little event, and honestly, I'm a bit surprised it took this long for an official event like this, because I, for one, can attest that people loved having school dance role plays in their igloos when I played the game as a kid. Penguin Cup. Right after the prom ended, Club Penguin had another sports-themed party, this one done to coincide with the 2014 FIFA World Cup. Players were invited to compete for one of 4 in-game teams by playing a soccer shootout minigame to earn points. Unsurprisingly, the team with a giant pool shark logo won, by a lot. Several rooms were redesigned to become the hub and training area for the teams, and the stage was also temporarily replaced with the Club Penguin Sports Network building, which was the sports news apparatus that was formed for this party. Music Jam 2014. Not having a formal music jam last year was kind of a letdown, but fortunately the party made its return this year, and I know I've been saying this a lot, but there were a few twists. For one, most of the party didn't take place on the island. Instead, most of the action took place on the Music Cruise, a luxury cruise line apparently run by Cadence. Cadence would also perform on stage throughout the party, but you could also see performances done by a handful of Disney stars, including Zendaya and Sabrina Carpenter. I always forget that Sabrina Carpenter was a Disney Channel star for a while. Her stint there is a bit past my generation. And Zendaya being here is kind of funny because Rocky, her character in Shake It Up, appeared on the island during the last Music Jam. More unsolved Club Penguin lore mysteries. The game's sound studio was also introduced during this party, which was a music creation game meant to be a more elaborate replacement for DJ 3K. Turbo Race 3000. There were a lot of little mini events this year. For a week after the music jam, the stadium was turned into a small racetrack and players were invited to test out Gary's new hot sauce powered go-karts. I've hardly mentioned the hot sauce thing in this video, but yeah, Club Penguin had a hot sauce thing among a few of the other things I've already mentioned. Completing the race would give you a few coins, and go-karting attire was given out for free. Frozen Party. Unlike a lot of recent movie-focused sponsored parties, the Frozen Party was not released to directly promote a film as it was coming out. In fact, it appeared to be added to the game due to popular demand. I guess I'm not really surprised, given that it was the highest grossing animated film of all time when it came out. The in-game story behind the party was that Club Penguin was going to be hit with a lot of sporadic changes in temperature. So, Arctic invited Elsa, Anna, and Olaf to the island to celebrate, because the cast of Frozen seemed to enjoy variable weather, apparently. During the party, penguins were able to collect magic snowflakes around the island which unlocked items, transformations, and even the ability to adopt a snowman puffle which was inspired by the character of Olaf. The island was decorated to look like the main locations in the film, but the appearance could be changed between a warm and cold design by players logged in, which I actually think is a unique gimmick. Anna and Olaf weren't actually seen in-game, but after the first week, Elsa's Ice Palace opened up as a room and she would appear every few minutes to perform an instrumental version of Let It Go. School and Skate Party. Admittedly, I find the idea of a back-to-school party to be a bit of a head-scratcher. I don't even know if they're being sarcastic here. That being said, there were some noteworthy things about this event. The school area was temporarily overhauled with tons of new rooms, and the school-themed decorations spread outward to the right half of the island. The main quest here was gathering a bunch of missing school supplies scattered around by Rookie and returning them to their proper locations. Additionally, the skate park room was permanently added to the game, hence the whole school and skate thing. The mall was also introduced here as a replacement for the stage, but it was only temporary. The permanent change would take place the following year. Halloween Party 2014. I feel like I haven't had to say this in a while, but this year's Halloween party was actually pretty similar to last year's, although I'm probably going to start saying it again because these last 2 years of parties were uniquely transformative in a way the game probably couldn't maintain long term. I hate to be negative, but we all kind of know how this story ends. The big focus this year was the Puffle Hotel turning into a much larger haunted hotel that needed to be explored after Gary's great-uncle Garywald had been kidnapped. Penguins were tasked by the bellhop character Skip with exploring the hotel to assemble a ghost catcher and stop the ghost Puffles from haunting the hotel. But, Disney property in the mid-2010s! It turns out Skip was actually an evil ghost twist villain who wanted to steal the ghost Puffle's power for himself. Members were able to adopt a ghost Puffle after defeating him. Also, a new Night of the Living Sled installment came out called Hotel of the Living Sled. It wasn't fully animated this time and instead was done with simple puppets, but I think it's a cute change of pace. 9th Anniversary Party. Club Penguin started celebrating its 9th full year the same day as the Halloween party. Like a lot of the recent anniversary events, only the coffee shop was decorated. It was a pretty simple one in terms of its decorations, but it still checked the main boxes. The color scheme this year was red and purple, but its stripe pattern was a lot less slanted than a lot of the older hats. For whatever that matters. Pirate Party 2014. Yes, you heard that right. There was a pirate party in 2014. There had been pirate-inspired events here and there throughout the game's history, but this was the first party to just be called a pirate party since 2007, the Bush presidency. Anyway, the story behind this party is that Rockhopper befriended a horde of pirate crabs and invited them on his ship only for them to take it over and steal his treasure. They also crashed his ship in the process. Penguins were asked to help him regain his treasure and defend the island by sword fighting against the crabs, and after getting the treasure back, Rockhopper casted them away from the island by making a fake treasure map and tricking them into sailing away to find it. Cute. Merry Walrus Parade. It's weird to talk about this separately from the main party, but because this one opened a whole 2 weeks earlier, I thought it earned its own slot. At the beginning of December, an extra room became available at the ski village that led players onto a moving parade float for the upcoming Merry Walrus event. It's nothing too extravagant, but I really like the moving rooms this game occasionally employs. Anyway, let's get to the main event. Merry Walrus Party. So, this year's holiday party wasn't a holiday party. At least in name, but there are obvious things about it that make it a holiday party. Most of the aesthetics are similar to what they had been doing for a while, just painted various shades of blue instead of red and green. Coins for change was still a big part of the party. But there were a few changes. It was the first time the in-game sky remained the normal daytime blue for the party since 2008, and it was the first time Rockhopper didn't dock his ship on the island for the festivities since 2007. The main quest for the party was participating in a bunch of Merry Walrus traditions, and doing so would net you items and donations a coin for changing your name. After doing all of the quests, you could meet the Merry Walrus and members could adopt a blue crystal puffle. There was actually a lot of muscle behind the Merry Walrus thing, more than you might expect. There was a 22-minute stop-motion TV special that aired on the Disney Channel. And also, I didn't mention this earlier, but a Merry Walrus-themed float also made it into the holiday-themed parades over at Disney parks, much like the float in-game. New Year's Day 2015. The fireworks this year returned to their historic locations, and the celebrations went on for a lot longer than they used to. Over 2 weeks, in fact, which is far longer than any other New Year's event. Star Wars Rebels Takeover. Club Penguin had another Star Wars event this year, and this one actually took place mostly on the island instead of, like, the Penguins going to the actual planets from A New Hope. It was a tie-in with the Star Wars Rebels show on Disney XD, and players were given quests to assist Penguin versions of the show's cast. I think one thing that I find charming about this party is the fact that although it was cool last time to visit the locations of A New Hope and Club Penguin, it was fun seeing the main areas of Club Penguin get Star Wars-ified, for lack of a better term. I also like how you could access a secret space room through the map during the party. That's cute to me. Sound Studio Party. Spoiler alert, there was no Music Jam in 2015, which is a small shame. What we got instead was a fusion, so to speak, of the Music Jams and the Hollywood Party from 2013 to celebrate the release of the Sound Studio mobile app. The main attraction was the Snowball Records building, where players could perform music in one of 4 genres: dance, pop, dubstep, and rock. Each genre had you play more or less the same minigame, just with different visuals. Something kind of weird about this event is that Cadence and the Penguin Band were slated to visit the island as meetable mascots, but apparently due to certain unforeseen bugs in-game, they just didn't. There was also no interface for this party, which makes it unlike pretty much every party for the past year or so. There actually was one made, but for whatever reason they just didn't use it. Pi Day. Club Penguin had a small event for the week encasing March 14th, otherwise known as Pi Day. The Mine Shack / University area was dolled up for the event, and snowballs thrown in the room were replaced with pies. There was actually a poll for small events to hold throughout the year in January that included Pi Day, but not a lot of players voted for it. Ironically, the only events that made it in the game were among the least popular choices. Puffle Party 2015. A few days into spring, Club Penguin had its 7th overall Puffle Party. The decorations this year were mostly the same, but the ski lodge was renovated around the same time and now led to a new area that had to be explored for the party's main quest. Apparently, a giant puffle broke into the renovation party and ate the cake, and the player was tasked with following it into the newly opened Puffle Wilds area, where a whole bunch of wild puffles could be adopted. It's kind of in the name. After doing some exploring, the player finds out that it was not a giant puffle who took the cake, but it was in fact Sam the Sasquatch. He kinda was a new character added later on in the game. In the aftermath of the party, most of the Puffle Wilds were closed off, but the main room with the tree trunk stayed. Cave Maze. Later in April, a small event opened up in the dock that involved navigating a maze below the island surface for a prize. The prize was a pickaxe, a bit anticlimactic for an underground adventure, but it probably was an item in high demand. The maze itself was heavily reminiscent of the maze you explored in the Mysterious Tremors PSA mission, given that it was also accessed to the dock's surface. But the main thing is that Herbert's earthquake drill could be found at the exit, repurposed into, like, a coffee truck. Also, there was a secret room. Haiku Day. Coming in with a stunning 4% in the blog poll mentioned earlier, the Haiku Day event took place around the same time as the Cave Maze, and honestly there wasn't much to it. No decorations or anything. Sensei was just meetable for a few days, and players were encouraged to recite haikus. Frozen Fever Party 2015. To tie in with the release of the Frozen Fever animated short, Club Penguin had a second Frozen-themed party that was pretty similar to the first one. Most locations remained the same, except for the dock, which received a slight makeover, and decorations were added for Anna's birthday to line up with the events of the short. Players were once again tasked with collecting magical snowflakes, but there were some new rewards to make it worthwhile for people who were around for the first Frozen party that took place, like, 8 months earlier. The Fair 2015. The fair returned in May, and once again all the action was held in the amusement park, although it had a couple of new attractions. There was a medieval-themed area introduced with its own new minigame added for members, and I like that they added it, given that the medieval party was no longer a thing. Something really noteworthy to me is that they actually brought back one of the mini-games from the 2013 Marvel Superhero Takeover as a carnival game for tickets, and I think this was a really good idea. They had made a lot of temporary minigames over the years, and honestly, it was a cool way to bring them back, instead of just leaving them in the vault forever. They also brought back a few transformations from previous parties this time around, which was also a clever method of bringing back old material in a new way. Especially because, not to be super negative, the team who developed this game had shrunk pretty dramatically recently, and with the reduced manpower, it probably was not as easy as it used to be to introduce all new transformations and emotes and other goodies every single month, so mixing stuff up was a good way to keep things moving. Rainbow Puffle Party. I honestly considered not even putting this in the video because it was a party exclusive to the mobile app version of the game, and I played that mobile app version like 2 times ever. But I thought, what the heck, I'll include it. For this event, Rainbow Puffles were temporarily made adoptable for all players regardless of membership, and the main area of the island was turned into a floating cloud world not unlike the habitat of said creatures. It's like Cloudsdale. I like that aesthetic. Royalty Week. Oh shoot, I just locked myself into talking about this by mentioning the Rainbow Puffle Party. I guess it's not a big deal. For a few weeks in the summer, anyone who logged into the Club Penguin app was able to claim a few free royalty-themed items. That's it. Festival of Snow 2015. I'm purely spitballing here, but I'm starting to get the impression that someone over at the Club Penguin headquarters was really taking a lot of the bring back old Club Penguin criticism to heart. Because having an ice sculpture showcase for the first time in 6 years and only giving out 2 items which hadn't been available in the main game since the first ice sculpture showcase 8 years ago gives the impression they were trying to tap into some nostalgia. I could be wrong though. Regardless, this was pretty much the same situation as the previous festivals. Players were asked to submit drawings that would be put into the game as ice sculptures, and yeah, I'm pleased with the old school vibe of this event. Inside Out Party. About a month after the American release of Inside Out, Club Penguin held a promotional party for the movie. One bone I will definitely throw this party is that unlike a lot of other sponsorships save for like the initial superhero takeover, there was more of an attempt to weave a story here that fit into the world of Club Penguin, at least in my view. The story goes that Rockhopper ate some cursed stinky cheese. I just realized I've gone almost this entire video without acknowledging the stinky cheese thing. And lost his memories, so Gary builds a machine that lets penguins transport into his mind and figure out the problem. And that's already enough for me. The main task for players is to help his emotions find all of Rockhopper's missing core memories and return them to his memory bank to restore his psyche to its natural state. And in the process, we get a little bit of insight about his character. It's not much, and it actually contradicts the lore established about him as a character from years previous, but I appreciate the gesture. Fashion Festival. For 3 weeks in August and September, Club Penguin had a fashion show event where players were invited to submit outfits under a variety of prompts in a giant contest. Penguin Style had one of its biggest issues ever to prepare, and after a couple of weeks, the votes were tallied up and the most popular outfits went on display. Well, actually, each prompt had 2 brackets, one for members and one for non-members to compete. And honestly, that seemed a bit silly to me at first, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. I mean, members obviously have a huge advantage, but also I imagine making outfits for these prompts as a non-member served an interesting challenge. This was also Dot the Disguise Gal's formal introduction as a meetable mascot, and she had a whole new outfit and persona to boot. Talk Like a Pirate Day. This was a 1-week event held at the beach, where penguins were encouraged to talk like pirates. Rockhopper made a few appearances throughout, and players were given a free pirate bandana, an item that hadn't been available since June of 2007. I'm starting to get really convinced about a calculated attempt at appealing to the old CP crowd here. I mean, banners and like 2 or 3 props and a singular item being given out? That just screams pre-2010 Club Penguin. I think I'm onto something here. Descendants Party. This party started the same day as Talk Like a Pirate Day, but it stayed for a week longer. And, alright, I kinda have to carbon date myself here because I don't know anything about Descendants. I had stopped watching the Disney Channel a couple years before it came out, and I have never watched it in my entire life. So forgive me if I get any details wrong. For this event, the Mine Shack and schoolrooms were decorated to resemble Oridon Prep, the main setting of the film. The iceberg was actually decorated as well, and there was a magical bridge erected to the mainland for the party, which I think is kind of neat. The only other time in the game's history where the iceberg was accessible by foot was in the prehistoric version of the island. Otherwise, it was pretty small scale. The items were all given out for free without any quest line, and it was the first main party since Operation Blackout to not have any temporary emoticons. 10th Anniversary Party. Alright, I'm basically convinced of my 2015 Old Club Penguin revival hypothesis, because for the game's 10-year anniversary, one of the main gimmicks was bringing back old party decorations to every single room as a way of paying homage to the 10 years of history the game had accrued. And that includes the Ice Bucket! The Ice Bucket is back! They basically did the same thing I'm doing in this video, exploring Club Penguin's history through highlighting its seasonal events, and I think that's really awesome, especially because the rooms had robotic tour guides that would give a bit more information about the parties. All the game's main mascots made appearances, which was definitely not the norm. The only thing I kinda want to tease a little bit is that this party actually ended before the game's actual anniversary, October 25th, but that was just so it didn't conflict the Halloween party, which took place immediately after this party came to an end. That's kind of a big thing this year. A lot of parties smushed together. Also, before I forget, there was a tie-in song by Cadence and the Penguin Band called Gonna Be Epic. Halloween Party 2015. For the last week of the 10th anniversary party, the robotic tour guides began to malfunction without much explanation. With the turnover to the Halloween party, they went completely rogue, and the main quest for the party was recovering them and figuring out what happened. Eventually, it's revealed that Herbert hacked the robots in order to try and scare the inhabitants of Club Penguin away, and to finish the job, he created a robot version of himself. He became a victim to his own folly, however, and the robot turns against its own creator. So it becomes up to you to save both the Penguins and Herbert. It's not actually that hard. Otherwise, the party is pretty similar to last year's. A lot more of the indoor rooms are decorated this year, which is a nice return to form. In the past couple years, that had become less common. Also, you could turn into a robot at the beach. Mustache Madness. This was a small event held in early November where a few mustaches were available for purchase at the forest. A couple of them were already items that had been added to the game, but a few of them were completely new. This event was almost certainly done to coincide with Movember, which is an annual charity event focused on raising awareness for men's health issues. I remember it being a big deal around this time. Extreme Paint Festival. Alright, so I kinda have to tell the next few months' events out of order for a little bit, because there is some crossover between them. The first event to cover is the Extreme Paint Festival, and it was a small event at the dock where penguins were able to throw paint and make a mess in front of a definitely not suspicious tent toward the back. There wasn't much to it in itself, but it was a canon cover-up for a much more elaborate and long-term operation by the EPF. Operation Crustacean. The logo of this event may lead you to thinking it would last until December 2nd, but for whatever reason, this event lasted for like 10 weeks. Don't ask me why. After the Halloween party, there was some talk in town about UFO sightings in-game. In fact, some players would randomly be abducted in-game in a rare event. To research the event, the EPF built Area 501, a research station looking into the strange events, and they covered it up with the aforementioned Extreme Paint Festival. Eventually, the operation went on, and players were tasked with helping none other than Herbert. Wow, it's like Super Paper Mario, or Super Mario RPG. Apparently, Klutzy the Crab had been abducted by the aliens, who we now find out are alien Puffles. Immediately after going on the UFO, Herbert steals the mysterious purple meteorite that powers the UFO and runs out, so it's up to the player to turn on its backup power and bring back its systems. That being said, even after fixing up the aircraft, the UFO isn't capable of leaving the planet anymore, meaning the Puffles are stranded, which is good for the ones that want to be adopted, but not all of them, I guess. This basically feeds into the next few months worth of events, except for the holiday party. Holiday Party 2015. I get the impression that Merry Walrus wasn't exactly a slam dunk, because Club Penguin went back to the traditional holiday parties this year. There wasn't much new stuff here. In fact, there was a lot of old stuff. The decorations were spruced up here and there, but a lot of the features were stuff we had seen before. But there are some upsides to that. The advent calendar was the main draw of the event, coming back for the first time since 2011. Also, Santa's sled came back for the first time since 2012, unless you count its inclusion during the 10th anniversary party. Apparently, they intended to also bring back the bakery but weren't able to. So yeah, it wasn't a super cutting edge party, but honestly I think that's fine. As I said earlier, the game was losing steam this year in terms of income and manpower, so it's not really surprising that the rapid development between 2012 and 2014 didn't last. New Year's Day 2016. Gosh, this video is long, and I still feel like I'm glossing over so many details. I'm probably gonna have to start the Pocateo Island video immediately after this one. Jeez. Anyway, our final New Year's event in the game's history. They didn't do one in 2017 for whatever reason. This year actually added small dance floors to the ski hill and iceberg to up the party a bit. Prehistoric Party 2016. The UFO alien puffle story continued on this year with the return of the Prehistoric Party. This year, penguins were asked to head back in time to dig for pieces of power fragments that could be used to replace the old UFO power supply. Other than that, it was pretty similar to the last party, except the volcano was closed. You could still adopt dino puffles and transform into dinosaurs, but you didn't need to get eggs for it this time. After enough fragments were dug up, Gary was able to build a new power core for the UFO and send the stranded alien puffles home. But this was not the end of the story. Operation Triumph. So, Operation Triumph continued on the story of recovering the alien power fragment Herbert stole during Operation Crustacean. That being said, there's not much to it really. All that really happens is Herbert causes a few small-scale shenanigans, like setting up a dance party at the snow forts, then shrinking a bunch of people at the town, and then sucking out all the color in the plaza. But no one seemed to be particularly bothered by it. Eventually, a hole opened up that led to the same cave maze from last year. Players who entered it and reached the end were able to disarm Herbert's machine and save the island. And it basically just ends there. You don't even see Herbert in-game. This is the last EPF operation. Talk about going out with a whimper. Puffle Party 2016. The Puffle Party returned in the middle of March. Initially, it was meant to only go on for 3 weeks, but it got extended for an extra 2. A 5-week party. If we're being honest, the island spent more time having parties than not having parties this year. The main draw this time around was playing hide and seek with certain types of puffles. In doing so would give you apparel relating to the type you just found. Every single puffle creature in the game's history was made adoptable, and puffle transformations also came back after being absent in 2015. Wilderness Expedition 2016. For the first time in like 4 years, Club Penguin had an expedition event, which is kind of insane when you think about it. I guess you could argue it got a bit less necessary since then, because so many parties began having some sort of narrative quest tie-in, so expeditions weren't as unique. Either way, the party returned this year, and it involved exploring the same forest maze from the 2011 Brown Puffle expedition, but this time to find Sam the Sasquatch's home village. Doing so gave you a handful of cute camping-themed rewards. Zootopia Party. Alright, it's time for the last set of sponsored parties in the game's history. For a roaring 7 weeks, Club Penguin was redecorated to resemble the varying habitat districts of the city of Zootopia. And it wasn't a party that got uber extended like the Puffle Party. It was intended to be 7 weeks from the jump. There wasn't much to this party, to be honest. The tasks, so to speak, are just going to the decorated rooms and getting a few free outfits based on characters from the movie, exclusively for members. But one thing out of the ordinary that they did here is that they rolled out the decorations over time. At first, only a few rooms were decorated, and after a couple of weeks, a few others got their own Zootopia treatment. Spreading out party tasks over time was definitely not a new thing, but I don't think they ever would roll out decorations themselves over time. Anyway, I don't mean to sound super negative. I really like the movie Zootopia. It's pretty easily the funniest Disney animated film of the last 30 years in my opinion, but it's evident with things like the simplicity of this year's few new parties and the fact that the Club Penguin Times is only coming out half as often now, that the game was really winding down. I've just seen a lot of people say the developers got lazy at this point, and I don't think that's the case, and I don't want to push that narrative. I think it has a lot more to do with the fact that the team was considerably smaller after significant layoffs in 2015. Finding Dory Party. Immediately after the Zootopia Party came to an end, the Finding Dory Party took place, and it was a similarly sized event. A handful of rooms on the island were decorated to match a few locations from the film, and the main quest was a scavenger hunt for items to jog Dory's memory and help her find her way home after accidentally ending up at Club Penguin. There's not much to really say here that wasn't also said about the Zootopia Party, but I will say that I like a lot of the coral reef decorations. Frozen Fever Party 2016. I feel bad, you know? I feel like I'm kicking this game while it's down. You know, I genuinely adore Club Penguin, and I'm making this video as a love letter to it and its history, but yeah, it's very clear things were a lot smaller scale at this point, because this year's Frozen Fever Party was almost the exact same as last year's. It wasn't like they mixed and matched a few old features like they had done in the past, or brought back all the same decorations but added a couple new rooms. It was the same. The quest and its rewards were completely identical, with the one exception of Elsa's giveaway not being available this time because for whatever reason, Elsa's Ice Palace and her live performance of Let It Go wasn't accessible this year, but Rockhopper was meetable. That's different. Other than that though, it's entirely the same. Halloween Party 2016. Club Penguin's final Halloween party was also its longest, starting as early as September. The decorations were more or less the same as last year's, just without the evil tour guide robots. The main focus this year was a scavenger hunt collecting the cursed candies from 2013, although the method was a little bit different. Collecting the candy would unlock items and apparently powered Gary's Monster Maker 3000, which was this year's way of transforming your penguin into a vampire, werewolf, or zombie. 11th Anniversary Party. Club Penguin coincided the anniversary and Halloween party this year, like they had been doing recently with the exception of 2015. It was pretty standard fare, and the main color scheme this year was red, yellow, and orange. Other than that, nothing super big or new. Music Jam 2016. The penultimate party of 2016 was the Music Jam. And man, the Music Jam is resilient. I'm just saying, they tried to rebrand it, drop it, or fuse it with other parties, but at the end of the day, the final music party was just a no-holds-barred music jam. And it wasn't just on the cruise, the island was decorated as well, so we got to see the return of a few old-school music jam attractions. The Casa Fiesta came back, the backstage room came back, and even the nightclub rooftop came back. The orchestra stage too, I wouldn't dare forget that. A few of the areas from non-music jam music parties made their return too. Listen, all I'm saying is that we music jammers lost a few battles, but we won the war. Jokes aside, the main focus of this party was seeking out Cadence and members of the Penguin Band for a few items, and Klutzy for some reason. Cadence and the Penguin Band also performed at the Snow Forts, and there was a huge variety of songs they would play. Yeah, definitely my favorite party of the year. Holiday Party 2016. The 12th and final holiday party was pretty similar to the previous one. The advent calendar made a return with new presents this time around, and you were able to do a few simple tasks around the island for coins. Most of the rooms were decorated the same as they were last year, with a couple changes, like the migrator having extra stinky cheese. The stinky cheese thing. But one thing I find amusing is that there were a few rooms that were decorated this year that hadn't been decorated in a while, but the illustrations used were often recycled or outright reused. This isn't a problem, by the way, I'm not complaining. They did this as well last month with the Music Jam, but they gave us a few blasts from the past this time around. The funniest example to me is that the underground pool was completely frozen and turned into an icy cave, and this specific design hadn't been used in 8 years. Club Penguin Island Party. As I said, there was no New Year's event this year. I'll just get that out of the way. Because within the next 3 months, Club Penguin would officially be shut down to make way for its successor, Club Penguin Island. So, starting on January 4th, Club Penguin dedicated its next to last party to the upcoming game. Info booths were placed to advertise some of the things that could be done over at Club Penguin Island, because Club Penguin Island is canonically different from, Club Penguin the Island. Doing the research rewarded you with a few cool items, including the alumni jacket, which let you flex your veteran status to the other penguins online. Waddle-On Party. Immediately following the Club Penguin Island party, the game pivoted to its final party ever, the Waddle-On Party, though at first glance you might miss it. The decorations were sort of cut from the same cloth, but there was a lot more going on here. Pretty much all the non-promotional mascot characters were meetable for the duration, and throughout the island there were trivia games held based on the game's history that would award players with pins for participating. It was a very heartfelt celebration of the game and its history, and the news of the coming end of the game was enough to bring back tons of legacy players to say goodbye. It got pretty emotional. I get a little worked up thinking about it even now. Of course, I can't go without mentioning that the iceberg, after over a decade of rumors and speculation, was finally made tippable during this party, and doing so rewarded you with a blue hard hat and what was admittedly a tear-jerking message. For the final week of the party and Club Penguin's time online, fireworks were added at certain parts of the island, and on the last day, all penguins were given free membership to use before the servers were disconnected. And then, around midnight Pacific Daylight Time on March 30th, 2017, Club Penguin servers were shut down. Thousands of longtime fans made their way online to say goodbye and experience the game's final few moments, and the total outcry was a big reminder that although the game hadn't been turning heads in the same way over the last few years, it was a cherished part of millions of lives nonetheless. I'm sure you've all seen the video with the Pokemon Black and White music. It's sad the game eventually shut down, but I can't entirely blame them for it happening. The market for kids' entertainment online had changed a lot. Young kids weren't going on like mini-clip and addicting games anymore. That's almost certainly why Disney had tried to carry over Club Penguin to a playable form on mobile devices. It didn't really stick though, unfortunately, and Club Penguin Island didn't even make 2 years before its servers were shut down. I'll admit I don't exactly have the intel to crunch the numbers, but the only other seemingly feasible option to keep the game alive I can think of was to basically stop making new content and just leave it as it is as a much smaller scale operation, though there would be some hangups there for both Disney, developers, and players alike, I'd imagine. And honestly, it probably wouldn't have worked, because Adobe Flash, the engine Club Penguin ran off of, was retired 3 years later. Fortunately, nowadays, there are private servers that can be played for anyone who still wants to come back, but I still kinda miss the original because, well, I had 10 years worth of items on it and now I have to start over. I don't even have the Sunstrucker yet on Club Penguin Journey. That being said, not having to pay for membership is nice, so, you know. Before I wrap this up, I do want to shout out all the uploaders who filmed footage of them playing the game over the years, as it gave me a good set of primary sources to write from for this video. The fan wiki was also super helpful for the making of this video, and I want to especially thank the people who've taken the time to help document the game and its history. It made my job easier. Of course, huge shout out to the main creative and community leads for the game. Chris Hendrick's YouTube channel is a favorite among fans for his videos talking about how the music and art, among other things, were done. And recently for the game's 19th birthday, Polo Field hinted at the possibility of making his own developer commentary videos. Although it's probably going to be 2 or 3 months from the point that I write this to the point where this video is fully uploaded, so you and I will both see where that goes. All in all, I love Club Penguin. I will always love Club Penguin, and I don't want this video to end on a bad note because of that. Club Penguin very much set the trajectory of my life as a YouTuber in stone. In online or offline, it will always be a very important memory to me. Even with 3 Frozen parties in a row. So, I'll say it. Waddle on, guys. Thanks for watching.